Cousin falsely accused me of sexual assault, family cut me off. Now she's dying, admitted the truth, but they still want me to stay silent. Let's call her Jade. My cousin wrongfully accused me of sexual assault, when I was 18. Sadly, my family thought her narrative true. 4 years older than me, Jade and I were close growing up, but finally we drifted away. She is the daughter of my uncle, who was a single father, younger brother of mom. After his ex-wife became pregnant, my uncle married young. Unfortunately, she cheated on him, and their marriage broke up a few years later. She tried to keep in touch with Jade for a few years, but finally moved away with her new partner and they never got back in touch. Respectable man, my uncle always battled obstacles on his own and refused assistance. After his divorce, he never sought another major relationship. He devoted his life to parenting Jade. He even built a college fund for Jade, but after she turned 18 he told her that although he had done all in his ability to help her, she was now on her own financially as he had to consider his retirement. Although Jade disagreed, I thought that was reasonable. If she wanted to keep on her studies, she should pay for them herself. Many arguments between her and her father resulted from her believing he should support her studies for as long as she desired. Jade thus visited my family a lot of times. She would come over to rant to my mom following every disagreement with her father. Although I personally felt my uncle was reasonable, I kept my thoughts to myself as Jade would visit to speak with my mother and not me. As she usually did, Jade came up to our house one day without warning. I was the only one in the house. My parents were away. Expecting her to go, I'd told Jade that my mother decided to stay in the living room since she needed some time away from her father following another dispute. To be honest, I wasn't interested in hearing it again as she used to vent quite loudly to my mother and I had heard enough about her battles with her father. Jade began venting to me since my mother was not here. Though I had rather different ideas on the topic, I could see she expected me to be as empathetic as my mother. I cut her off when she once more started grumbling about her father. Although my mother might have agreed with her points of view, I felt my uncle was acting rather sensibly. He had spent his whole life raising her to be a competent and capable independent lady, I told her. Now it was her chance to show him right. If she truly wanted to pursue a master's degree or perhaps a doctorate, she would have to do what everyone else does and pay for it herself. She majored in STEM, hence I knew that whatever job she finally landed would be sufficient to cover her expenses. She had just to at least try. She insisted though, that she couldn't work and study at the same time and that she would find it too much to manage. I advised her maybe she should give up on further study if she already decided it was difficult for her to work while she was still in school. It was unjust to demand her father keep paying for everything, especially after he had already done so much for her, and she was treating him like the villain instead of being appreciative, I said. She quite obviously hadn't anticipated that reality check. She started screaming at me and calling me a vile human being as soon as I said all of this. She said I was a pampered brat who didn't deserve the support I received, hence I would never be able to relate what she was experiencing. Though I stayed quiet, to be honest I felt she was more of a pampered brat than I was. She screamed at me for a few minutes then fled the house sobbing. I avoided her since, as I mentioned, I had no interest in hearing her grievances over and over again. The sequence of events surprised me as well. My whole life collapsed the next day when she accused me of One accusation turned everything around. After 3 years of quiet from my family, folks are at last learning she had lied. My parents woke me early the day after Jade and I argued, stating that my uncle and Jade were here to visit me, and it was reportedly rather vital. I had no idea what was going on, but when I got downstairs Jade started shouting, accusing me of the night before and acting as though she was breaking down. My parents were equally startled, and my uncle seemed really worried. Jade was acting as though she were not even in a state fit for communication. Most of the speaking came from my uncle. He said that following her confrontation with him, Jade had been inconsolable when she had returned home the day before. She eventually informed him I had lured her in and carried out the conduct she was now accusing me of when my parents were not home. Not even my uncle could look at me, and my parents avoided eye contact as well. None listened when I tried to object and assert my innocence. It was appalling. People already treated me like a criminal even though I had done nothing. My parents begged my uncle for pardon right in front of me, asking him not to publicly disclose the allegation or report me. They claimed they will do all necessary to resolve the matter. Whether I cried out or not, my uncle and dad totally turned away from me. It was so annoying that I grabbed a vase and tossed it against the wall in an attempt to get their eye. That backfired regrettably. My dad lost his cool, grabbed my arm, and hauled me to my room, closing me within. There was no way I could let Jade get away with this, hence I kept hammering against the door until my hands and arms started hurting. Telling such a big lie may have destroyed my reputation. Sadly, my dad allowed me out of the room only when my uncle and Jade left. I started crying right away as he opened the door and tried to explain to them he hadn't done anything, but they informed me they had seen security footage from the cameras outside our house. Jade had come over the previous evening, they noted, and had left the house crying a few minutes later. They decided to trust her based on her tear-filled fleeing. They told me they were embarrassed of the kind of son Jade had produced and that she had no reason to lie about what had transpired. While my mother was crying and unable to even talk, my dad assured me that, with great persuasion, they had persuaded my uncle and Jade not to file lawsuits. They were obliged to pledge something in return though. To spare her from seeing me and revisiting the horrific event, Jade and my uncle insisted that I be taken far away. After much debate, my dad decided to send me to live with my great uncle somewhere far from the family. With his bad attitude and anger problems, this great uncle was the least liked family member. Though he said it was the only fix, my dad knew I hated him. Not only was I being sent away, but they also told Jade that to keep things quiet, they were going to take my college fund and give it to her. I tried to complain, but there was no communication with them. Finally, I gave up as I no longer saw the need. Not even my own folks trusted me. Since her own father would never accept financial help from anyone, including his own family, I understood that Jade had most likely accused me unjustly only to control my parents and extract money out of them. After that episode, a few days later I was ready to go and packed. Neither my parents bothered to say goodbye or give me a hug. They kept me under house arrest by posing as I wasn't even at home for the following few days. My phone was taken away and I was not let said farewell to any of my friends. They cautioned me that they would destroy my life personally should I fail to get off the grid and vanish from everyone's lives. A falsehood Jade had uttered drove me to distance from everything I knew and cut relationships with everyone from my past. My great uncle showed in a few days following that to pick me up, and I was sent off to live with him in what felt like an exile. Not one person from my past has contacted me since then, not even my friends or family. I had to totally start again in my life. It was quite challenging to fit in with my great uncle when I initially moved in. Throughout the day he taunted me nonstop even though he had no idea why I had been sent out. Though he had no idea why I had been sent out, he would harass me nonstop during the day. He would hold it against me and tease me about it based just on my being kicked out. I had to walk on eggshells around him as he had a bad attitude and rage problems as I've noted. Though I knew my parents were paying him money every month, he still acted as though he was doing me a great favor by allowing me to stay with him. After the first few weeks, I understood there was no use to weep over lost milk. I knew I couldn't live with him indefinitely. My parents had cut me off and forbade me from interacting with anybody from my former life. I resolved to start looking for work as all I could do was maximize the circumstances. Not even could I go to college. I had been let into the college of my choice, but I lacked the resources to pay for attendance. Following several weeks of moping about and a few interviews, I at last landed a job as a warehouse worker. Although the work paid little and was physically demanding, at least with my first pay I could leave the house owned by my great uncle. I had the good fortune to have a few colleagues around my age who were likewise having financial difficulties. The three of us decided to chip in and share an apartment and grew close friends. I knew my great uncle would consider it a good riddance, so I didn't even bother telling him when I moved out of his house. Never heard from any of my family members once I moved out. I have been living with the same folks I found my first apartment with for the past 3 years. Every one of us has been quite fortunate. After a few months of working in the warehouse, all three of us resolved to keep searching for better prospects as the work was quite physically demanding. We all aspire to eventually go to college, hence throughout the past 3 years we have switched jobs and worked to save some money. I'm making a good salary currently working in sales. I have been considering applying once more to universities. My 2 buddies are doing great as well. We recently moved into a larger apartment in a far better area. Naturally, my family believes it's the ideal time to attempt and come back into my life now that things are beginning to show promise for me. I was pretty taken aback when my dad contacted me by email a few days ago since, as I indicated, I hadn't spoken with them in 3 years. Since it was one of the rules my parents made when they kicked me out and I had been anxious about them disseminating the truth and tarnishing my name, I am not active on social media. I so stayed to the guidelines. Though they never tried to get in touch with me, my email address has not changed in 3 years and I never banned them anywhere. Reading the email, it was essentially an apology for all that had transpired over the preceding 3 years. To enable his correct outreach to me, my dad required my address and contact details. In case I wished to get in touch on my own time, he also included his personal contact details. Jade had at last chosen to disclose the truth about what actually transpired, Thus his apology and the abrupt attempt at reconciliation sprang from it. She was dying and, I suppose, had at last acquired a conscience or something. She informed her father the truth for whatever reason, and he talked with my parents. My parents chose to get back in touch with me once they knew the truth. Regarding Jade, her pancreatic cancer diagnosis makes it quite improbable she will survive. She has been suffering for the past 8 months. Her health is just getting worse even with continuous medication. Ironically, she couldn't even make decent use of the money from my education fund. She squatted all the money on bad life decisions after screwing me off. She chose to take a gap year with all that money and tour the globe to expand her horizons and find herself instead of working toward her master's degree. Wanting to live luxuriously, she had already spent more than half of her savings when she returned roughly 1.5 years earlier. She came back with very little left and began pestering my parents for more. If she stole any more money from my parents though, my uncle threatened to cut her off. She thus gave up on the concept of schooling since she lacked enough money left to afford a master's degree without working and since working was something she refused to do. She still had some money left, but she kept her careless way of life instead of using it sensibly or trying to increase capital. She was already somewhat spoiled and lethargic from her year-long holiday. Despite not even seeking a job, she ultimately wasted more money purchasing an apartment and living above her means. She landed a job around a year ago, but she had to quit shortly after learning she had cancer. She now needs the money, hence she has to sell her flat and all else she purchased. Although I don't want to come across as callous, after learning what had happened to her I couldn't help but feel some gratification. She was her own worst enemy, so she had no enemies. After I closed the email from my dad, I had to consider whether or not I wanted to contact my parents again. I decided to talk to my friends about it, which also meant I at last had to tell them the truth about why my parents had kicked me out. I had simply informed them that we argued. Up until then, I had not disclosed the actual cause. Email later, I at last opened it to my buddies. I told them everything about Jade, how she had lied and thrown me under the bus, and how my parents had thought her over me. They not only drove me to live with the worst relatives conceivable but also had me cut everyone from my past off and threatened to destroy my reputation should I go against them. The truth I was imparting to my companions hardly seemed possible. They urged me not to contact my parents after I was done. They claimed they wouldn't pardon my parents either, if they were in my place. Since these are my closest friends and at this time they are essentially the only ones I have, I pay great attention to their advice. It's not only that they advised me to let go and avoid running across my parents again. They also advised me to talk about what happened to me. Though I did nothing illegal, I have been living in anxiety for the past 3 years. They are right, my parents choose to believe someone lied about me, hence I had to give up so much of my life. I have to talk if I want to take back my life. I told my parents I intended to reveal the actual account of events before I went public. People have a right to know the truth. So it makes no difference whether Jade is lying on deathbed. She destroyed my life. Today it is my chance to recover it. I thus texted the number my dad had supplied me and informed him exactly what I was going to do. The screenshots of the email my dad sent me already proved Jade had been lying. I could thus post the truth on social media immediately. Forget about just blogging, I may at last have social media once more. Though I suppose he misinterpreted the circumstances, I wasn't asking my dad for approval. Now he and my mother, together with my uncle, are blowing my phone and asking me not to do this. They contend that Jade has already gone through a lot, is suffering more than she has ever done, and has gotten her karma. They say I need not discipline her going forward. They are requesting me not to reveal the facts in public since it will damage Jade's reputation. Without saying why I left in the first place, they seem to believe I can come back into their life and resume what I left behind. In a sense, they are correct, no one will probably challenge it. Though I could, I do not think I want to. Jade stole a great portion of my life and even my friends find it quite reasonable for me to share the truth. It is about people knowing what actually happened, not about exacting revenge against her. Besides, there are few logical reasons for missing 3 years from everyone's life and then showing up again without a word. I'm happy enough here, so I don't even intend to return to the city. Yet I do miss some of my relatives and friends who treated me well. They should, at least, be entitled to know the truth. The only thing keeping me from posting is the constant calls and texts from my parents and uncle. They almost have been begging me not to go public. Jade seems to be in quite poor form. What then would happen if I went ahead and revealed to my cousin, even if she is on deathbed, the truth of why I had to leave everything behind for 3 years? Update 1. I finished it, lads. I considered it for a long time, repeatedly asked friends, and they all advised the same thing. Though I hadn't done anything, Jade and her family had taken away 3 years of my life that I could have spent properly, and I had to live in fear because of them. Whether or not Jade is in condition, it would be quite legitimate for me to exact retribution. Many of the responses on this reflected the same viewpoint. Ultimately, it was my choice at the finish. Knowing most people would support me helped me to feel much better. My first post was a week ago, and last night I finally posted a narrative of everything that has transpired in my life together with an explanation for my 3-year absence from the net. Friends, relatives, everyone who knew me, have contracted out to let me know they are here for me and have sorely missed me. I trust them as I had several communications from folks over the first few months after I vanished. Apparently, my parents advised everyone not to search for me after that, saying I wanted to be left alone since I had gone through something horrific and needed time and space to recover. People thus stopped trying to get in after the first few months, believing they were honoring my choices. My friends informed me they had repeatedly asked my parents where I was, but my parents never told them, so they couldn't get in touch with me. Even many of my family claimed to have waited patiently for me to come back. Seeing how ready everyone was to welcome me back and how none had forgotten me made me somewhat cry. Most importantly, people have claimed that they always regarded Jade to be shady. Nonetheless, what she did was low, even by her standards. My mom and uncle haven't said anything thus far. I hope they stay out of it, as I truly don't want to talk to them. Regarding myself, having all of this off my mind makes me feel a lot more free. Speaking up about what happened was wise. I have no regrets about anything. Update 2. I posted it some few days ago, and yesterday my folks got in touch with me. Having only asked one thing, that I let sleeping dogs lie, they informed me they were quite let down in me. They wanted me to come up with a reason for my 3-year absence, but not tell everyone the truth about what happened, since they think Jade deserves peace and quiet in her present state. After my post, apparently, Jade has lost almost all of her friends, and even family members are no longer eager to talk to her. They seem to be blaming me. It's startling that they still provide more concern for what Jade is going through than for their own son's experiences. I told them I no longer bothered about their displeasure. An apology will never be sufficient. They let me down on several levels, and today they have no right to demand anything from me. I could say the same thing about myself if they believe Jade should have peace and quiet only because she is cancer-ridden. I was just 18 when they booted me out and forced me to live with my nasty great uncle. They showed no pity or forgiveness for me. I at least am speaking the truth. Jade lies, and she got away for 3 years. I'm going to take back my life now, and I'm not going to let anyone attempt and cause me shame about it. I advise them not to get in touch with me ever again, and that their only cause of disappointment should be themselves. Then I finally blocked them. Something I should have done long ago, but I was confused and afraid. Speaking up about what has occurred to me, though, has helped me to find closure, and today I am not under pressure to deal with my parents. For all I care, they and their expectations can go for a hike. Update 3. Hey, after 3 hard years this weekend, I finally chose to see my friends and relatives. It turned out to be rather the finest choice I have ever taken. Along with me, more for moral support than anything else, were my housemates. To be honest, they have gotten so close that we are now like brothers, and I wanted them to see my buddies too. Everyone has been getting along fantastic. My buddies were happy to see me. Since they all were outraged when I mentioned I was planning to stay in a hotel, I am actually living with one of them right now. Though I'm returning in a few days, my heart is simply so happy that I cannot even put it into words. We are spending our time of life living together in one of my friends' residences among my roommates and old buddies. I have also visited quite a few of my relatives, who have informed me they have cut off my mom, uncle and Jade. They never intend to be involved with them ever once more. At the end of the day, people will always stand for what is right, which makes me rather glad. Having individuals around who love me more than my parents ever did makes me happy, as they did not forget me. Am I the asshole for refusing to move my wedding to accommodate my brother's travel schedule? Now, everyone is furious with me. Living alone, I'm a 28-year-old lady with a regular 9-to-5 job. After almost 4 years together, Erin, my fiancé, and I have been engaged for around 1 year. We are at last organizing our wedding, something I have been dreaming about. I have given every tiny detail great care. For the past 4 months I have been tirelessly trying to make sure everything is flawless. We expected all of our loved ones to be there, so we selected the date, issued invites. That was the intended course of action regardless. Brandon and Daisy, my parents, make for an intriguing team. My 58-year-old dad works for a building company. He has always been the quiet, follow-through kind. Daisy, my mother, 55, has stayed at home for as long as I can recall. They have always harbored a particular fondness for my 32-year-old older brother, Fred. Actually, soft spot could be understated. Certainly their favorite, he is the golden child if you will. Fred is somewhat a bit of a character. Though I'll say he's usually ambitious, none of his commercial endeavors ever really turn out. He seems to live in a fantasy world where his next great invention would at last make him wealthy, having had several failed businesses. Married to Alice, 30, he has 2 children, 3-year Jenna and 5-year Ethan. Although I personally have nothing against them, it is no secret they live much over their means. My parents are always rescuing them. It has come to the point where it is expected. While I have always had to fend for myself, Fred and his family effectively live off the support of my parents. Though I knew there would be some drama, especially with Fred's concerns, I couldn't wait to inform my family when Aaron proposed. Still, I tried to be upbeat. I recall the day we announced our participation. Just close family and friends, we had a little gathering at our residence. Sharing the news made me very eager, and for a split second it felt as though perhaps my parents would be delighted for me rather than only focused on Fred. Naturally though, Fred and Alice took the front stage. Just midway through our announcement, Fred began discussing his plans to open a new company and his desire to move to a larger house. The entire dialogue turned from our involvement to Fred's most recent ideas. Though it was aggravating, to put it mildly, I did not want to create a scene. I simply let my pride slide after swallowing it. Aaron observed though, and later that evening he told me he was glad of my handling of it. That was quite meaningful to me. Choosing the day was still another challenge. 4 months ahead we chose a date so that everyone had plenty of time to arrange. Before deciding on it, I even followed up with my parents to see whether they were conflict-free. No trouble, they promised me they would be there. Although I should have known better, I thought that marked the end of it. I went all out in the particulars. We selected flowers, a lovely location, and the ideal outfit. Everything was lining up and I was growing increasingly enthusiastic. This was meant to be our day, a celebration of our love amid the people most important to us. Hoping it would assist to ease any possible problems, I also included Fred and Alice in the wedding party. Deeply though, I felt a storm was building. That storm struck when my parents abruptly contacted me from out of the blue with a pressing demand. It sounded bad since they had to discuss the wedding. My parents abruptly decided a few weeks ago to travel with Fred and his family. At first I puzzled myself since I assumed they were discussing a trip following the wedding. But actually, they meant the week my wedding was scheduled. Since the wedding date ran counter to their vacation schedule, they wanted to know whether I might potentially change it. I gasped. I booked everything, the venue, the caterers, and had months of planning for this wedding. I sent invites. And now, as if it were some laid-back dinner gathering, they were asking me to reschedule the date. Suddenly less significant than a last-minute trip with Fred and his family was my wedding day, the day meant to be about Aaron and me. Though I attempted to keep cool, I was enraged. Why would they want to schedule a trip right next to the wedding date we have already decided upon? The answer from my mother was, well, you know how occupied Fred's calendar is, and this was the only time they could all go together. It shocked me. Fred's trip came first for them, then my wedding. I informed them there was no choice about the date. Everything was previously set, I could not have moved it merely to fit Fred's trip. Suggesting that perhaps I should at least speak with the venue and see if they could change the date, my dad tried to be a peacemaker. But I closed that right away. The date was decided upon and that was definitive. My mother became irate and declared I was being irrational when I insisted on a different date. She continued on how family should come first, and how my rigidity was making things tough for everyone. She even charged me with trying to sour their friendship with Fred and his family. Though I stood my ground, that truly stung. I informed them I was not going to reschedule the date. If they missed it, that was on them. For a minute they were quiet. Then my mother remarked they would have to think about it. They hung up, not even bidding farewell. It still amazed me that my own parents, on vacation, were genuinely thinking about skipping my wedding. Furious on my behalf, Aaron advised me to try to straighten things out by calling them back. I therefore followed. Hoping for some middle ground, I phoned them, but things did not proceed as expected. I tried to convey the significance of this wedding to me, the length of time I had been arranging it, and how painful it was that they were even recommending I change the date. Still, they were tenacious. My dad kept stating that Fred's family had already booked everything, fully ignoring the fact that I had booked everything in advance too. My mom kept suggesting that I was being irrational. Changing my schedule would be equally as difficult for me. It felt like chatting to a stone wall. I realized at the time I had to include the extended relatives. I told my aunt, who I live somewhat near, The circumstances. She promised to talk to my parents. She was exactly as startled as I was. Maybe hearing it from someone else will help them to recognize how foolish they were acting. My parents doubled down instead of backing off though. Beginning to present me as the irrational one, they began phoning other family members. They claimed I was not compromising and causing problems for everyone. They even made hints suggesting I was envious of Fred and sought to punish him by postponing the wedding date. Though some of the family began to support me, stating I should be more accommodating of Fred's family, it was total stupidity. They were obviously attempting to get me to cave in. I was not going to let them prevail. They were trying to compel me to modify the date by means of shame and family pressure. I was about to let them wreck it just to please Fred. I had every right to have my wedding on the day I had selected. I thus informed them that the date was set. Should they be unable to make it, that would be their choice. But that was final. I was not going to alter it. So Reddit, am I the jerk for not adjusting the wedding date in response to the vacation of their golden child? I am very appreciative of everyone who took the time to reply. After publishing my experience here, I got an incredible amount of support and guidance. Reviewing the comments, many individuals speculated that there could be more to my parents' abrupt trip plans than they were disclosing. It started me to consider, thus I chose to dig some. I began by chatting once more with my aunt, who has always seemed to me as essentially a second mother. She was not surprised by what was happening as she knew how my parents are with Fred. She became quite quiet though, when I mentioned the vacation. A moment later she said she had heard Fred was once more experiencing some major financial difficulties. His most recent commercial endeavor apparently failed, and he owed money. Though not enough, my folks had started supporting him once more. Desperate, Fred was seeking for a means to keep his head above water. As it happens, the trip was really a cover tale. Though not for a laid-back vacation, my parents were intending to send Fred and his family to Europe. They were scheduled to meet some possible backers Fred had located abroad. Before Fred lost everything, the entire trip was a last-ditch attempt to find someone to commit to his company. Their financial position was depending on this trip to save Fred, hence they were quite determined to travel. When I learned, I became enraged. It was about my parents once more putting Fred above everything else, including my wedding, not only about the vacation. They were ready to skip my big day in order to try to save Fred from another problem he had created. Knowing the facts, I understood I had to face Fred. I inquired whether we might meet when I phoned him. I didn't want to allow him time to get ready for any excuse, thus I didn't inform him what it was about. I came right to the point when we got together. I assured him I understood his financial problems, the trip, the investors. He initially tried to play it off, claiming it was merely a business opportunity that happened to line up the wedding date, but I was not buying it. Defensively, he stated I didn't know how much pressure he was under. How he was trying everything he could to support his family. I reminded him that our parents had been rescuing him for years. This was not the first time he had fallen into a financial hole. Fred said at last that things were terrible. His company was close to bankruptcy, hence he would lose everything should this investor transaction fall short. But he sought to guilt-trip me rather than own responsibility. As his sister, he advised me to want to assist him in whatever capacity, even if that meant changing the date of my wedding. He charged me with being egotistical and unconcerned about his family. That was the final straw. I informed him that although I had supported him as much as I could over the years, I would not be sacrificing my wedding day for his bad choices. I made it plain that I was not going to modify the date. If he couldn't be there, that was his option. I went away leaving him seated there. Following the confrontation with Fred, I chose to get in touch with Alice. I wanted to hear her side of the tale since I wasn't sure how much she knew about things. She seemed tense as soon as we sat down when we met for coffee. She most likely understood I was not there to discuss wedding preparations. I asked her straightforwardly about her knowledge of Fred's predicament and the European trip. She said she knew the financial problems but lacked all the specifics. Though Fred had withheld a lot of it from her to guard her, she knew things were horrible. She appeared startled when I told her the true motivation for the vacation. She was unaware that my parents intended to try to find investors for Fred's company during the trip. Alice said she had been concerned about Fred's spending patterns for some time, but every time she brought it up he would dismiss her. She also said she was disappointed about missing the wedding, but Fred had persuaded her this trip was absolutely essential for their futures. When I told her how much this was affecting me and how it was seriously dividing the family, she seemed really offended. Alice clearly seemed to be in a difficult position. She wanted to help her husband, but she also wanted to avoid being the cause my parents missed my wedding. I wasn't holding my breath when she promised to speak with Fred and try to find another way to handle things. If only Fred is stubborn. Knowing that Alice wasn't totally on board with this strategy made me feel a bit better, but I also realized that ultimately Fred was probably going to act any way he felt was best for him, regardless of how it affected the rest of us. Given everything that had transpired, I came to see that gathering the entire family and laying everything out on the table was the only way to fix this. Though I wasn't sure how it would turn out, I knew that it would only become worse if we avoided confronting this squarely. I thus convened a family conference. We needed to talk, I told Fred, Alice and my parents. No apologies, no delays. We chose to get together at my folks' house. Having Aaron at my side made me happy as he came to support me. You could see my folks were concerned since they were already here. Arriving soon afterward, Fred and Alice seemed defensive from the first. We all gathered in the living room, and I lost no time. I began by informing them I knew Fred's financial problems and the true purpose of the Europe vacation. Fred tried to seem as if it wasn't a big problem as my parents looked startled. I had none at all. I laid everything out without holdback. The years of favoritism, the never-ending bailouts, and how this was only the most recent illustration of Fred coming first over me. I told them I knew they wanted to assist Fred, but there had to be a line and this was it. I described how much this wedding meant to me. How much work I had put into organizing it and how heartbroken I was that they would be ready to toss it all for travel. I then took out the proof I had collected, copies of emails and messages between Fred and my parents debating the trip, the investors, and how they should keep it under wraps. I even kept a copy of the itinerary proving that the vacation fell during my wedding week. Fred was enraged that I had gone behind his back to obtain this information. My parents seemed to want to crawl under the couch. I gave no thought at all. I was not going to allow them to keep controlling me or guilt-inducing me about wanting to have my wedding as scheduled. Alice wasn't totally on board with the vacation, which also seemed to surprise Fred. He turned to her, but she only turned away to validate what I had said. Starting to yell, Fred accused me of attempting to ruin his life and said I was merely jealous since he was the successful one in the family. Saying she only wanted to help both of her children and didn't want to have to pick between us, my mom started crying. Silence from my dad really infuriated me. Usually the one to keep out of the drama, he would have been here to support me this time. At last Alice spoke up, saying she felt uneasy about missing the wedding given her knowledge of the whole truth. She claimed they had to come up with another approach to handle Fred's company issues outside of compromising family occasions. Fred seemed inclined toward conflict, but Alice held her ground. In that instant I did indeed start to respect her somewhat. But I still had to finish. They had to decide whether to give this trip first priority and miss my wedding or find another method to assist Fred that did not necessitate deserting me. I made it plain that I would not be changing the date. If they could not accept this, they were clearly choosing what they wanted. I let them decide over 24 hours. I warned them I would terminate relations with them should they decide not to show up for the wedding. I was not going to let them ruin my wedding day or allow them to treat me as though I did not matter. I even intimated that, should they compel me, I will publicly share the complete truth. I knew that his final requirement was for his possible investors to learn about his financial mess. This was my trump card. Fred was furious as my parents seemed as though they had been struck by a truck. Alice merely looked depressed. Though I was tired of being pushed about and of constantly putting Fred's wants second, I didn't want to do this. Telling them they knew how to get to me, I got up, walked out with Aaron. Things have been tough since that conference. Neither my parents nor Fred have heard from each other, hence I'm not sure what they will decide. I am thus simply waiting to find out whether my parents will at last prioritize me or whether this marks the end of our relationship as I know it. Update. My parents contacted out at last after what felt like an eternity. It was the longest 24 hours of my life, and as I waited for their judgment I couldn't concentrate on anything else. I knew nothing about what they would say when my phone rang, and part of me wanted not to hear it. My mother began her apology first. They had thought a lot, she stated following our last talk. They asked me to change the date and came to see how much this wedding meant to me and how cruel they had been. She said she hadn't thought about how much they were hurting me in the process and they had been overly preoccupied trying to save Fred from his most recent catastrophe. We chose to gather at my parents' house. Having Aaron at my side made me happy as he came to support me. You could see my folks were concerned since they were already here. Arriving soon afterward, Fred and Alice seemed defensive from the first. We all gathered in the living room and I lost no time. I began by informing them I knew Fred's financial problems and the true purpose of the Europe vacation. Fred tried to seem as if it wasn't a big problem as my parents looked startled. I had none at all. I laid everything out without holdback. The years of favoritism, the never-ending bailouts, and how this was only the most recent illustration of Fred coming first over me. I told them I knew they wanted to assist Fred, But there had to be a line and this was it. I told them how much this wedding meant to me, how much work I had put into organizing it, and how heartbroken I felt that they would be ready to toss it all for travel. I then pulled out the material I'd collected, copies of emails and texts between Fred and my parents debating the trip, the investors, and how they should keep it under wraps. I even kept a copy of the itinerary proving that the vacation fell during my wedding week. Fred was enraged that I had gone behind his back to obtain this information. My parents seemed to want to crawl under the couch. I gave no thought at all. I was not going to allow them to keep controlling me or guilt-inducing me about wanting to have my wedding as scheduled. Alice wasn't totally on board with the vacation, which also seemed to surprise Fred. He turned to her, but she only turned away to validate what I had said. Starting to yell, Fred said I was merely jealous since he was the successful one in the family and accused me of wanting to ruin his life. Saying she only wanted to help both of her children and didn't want to have to pick between us, my mom started crying. Silence from my dad really infuriated me. Usually the one to keep out of the drama, he would have been here to support me this time. At last Alice spoke up, saying she felt uneasy about missing the wedding given her knowledge of the whole truth. She claimed they had to come up with another approach to handle Fred's company issues outside of compromising family occasions. Fred seemed inclined toward conflict, but Alice held her ground. In that instant I did indeed start to respect her somewhat. I still had to finish though. They had to decide whether to give this trip first priority and miss my wedding or find another method to assist Fred that did not necessitate deserting me. I made it plain that I would not be changing the date. If they could not accept this, they were clearly choosing what they wanted. I let them decide over 24 hours. I warned them I would terminate relations with them should they decide not to show up for the wedding. I was not going to let them ruin my wedding day or allow them to treat me as though I did not matter. I even intimated that, should they compel me, I will publicly share the complete truth. I knew that his final requirement was for his possible investors to learn about his financial mess. This was my trump card. Fred was furious as my parents seemed as though they had been struck by a truck. Alice merely looked depressed. Though I was tired of being pushed about and of constantly putting Fred's wants second, I didn't want to do this. Telling them they knew how to get to me, I got up, walked out with Aaron. Things have been tough since that conference. Neither my parents nor Fred have heard from each other, hence I'm not sure what they will decide. I am thus simply waiting to find out whether my parents will at last prioritize me or whether this marks the end of our relationship as I know it. Update. My parents contacted out at last after what felt like an eternity. It was the longest 24 hours of my life, and as I waited for their judgment I couldn't concentrate on anything else. I knew nothing about what they would say when my phone rang, and part of me wanted not to hear it. My mother began her apology first. They had thought a lot, she stated following our last talk. They asked me to change the date and came to see how much this wedding meant to me and how cruel they had been. She said she hadn't thought about how much they were hurting me in the process and they had been overly preoccupied trying to save Fred from his most recent catastrophe. We chose to gather at my parents' house. Having Aaron at my side made me happy as he came to support me. You could see my folks were concerned since they were already here. Arriving soon afterward, Fred and Alice seemed defensive from the first. We all gathered in the living room and I lost no time. I began by informing them I knew Fred's financial problems and the true purpose of the Europe vacation. Fred tried to seem as if it wasn't a big problem as my parents looked startled. I had none at all. I laid everything out without holdback. The years of favoritism, the never-ending bailouts, and how this was only the most recent illustration of Fred coming first over me. I told them I knew they wanted to assist Fred, but there had to be a line and this was it. I told them how much this wedding meant to me. How much work I had put into organizing it, and how heartbroken I felt that they would be ready to toss it all for travel. I then pulled out the material I had collected, copies of emails and texts between Fred and my parents debating the trip, the investors, and how they should keep it under wraps. I even kept a copy of the itinerary proving that the vacation fell during my wedding week. Fred was enraged that I had gone behind his back to obtain this information. My parents seemed to want to crawl under the couch. I gave no thought at all. I was not going to allow them to keep controlling me or guilt-inducing me about wanting to have my wedding as scheduled. Alice wasn't totally on board with the vacation, which also seemed to surprise Fred. He turned to her, but she only turned away to validate what I had said. Starting to yell, Fred said I was merely jealous since he was the successful one in the family and accused me of wanting to ruin his life. Saying she only wanted to help both of her children and didn't want to have to pick between us, my mom started crying. Silence from my dad really infuriated me. Usually the one to keep out of the drama, he would have been here to support me this time. At last Alice spoke up, saying she felt uneasy about missing the wedding given her knowledge of the whole truth. She claimed they had to come up with another approach to handle Fred's company issues outside of compromising family occasions. Fred seemed inclined toward conflict, but Alice held her ground. In that instant I did indeed start to respect her somewhat. I still had to finish though. They had to decide whether to give this trip first priority and miss my wedding or find another method to assist Fred that did not necessitate deserting me. I made it plain that I would not be changing the date. If they could not accept this, they were clearly choosing what they wanted. I let them decide over 24 hours. I warned them I would terminate relations with them should they decide not to show up for the wedding. I was not going to let them ruin my wedding day or allow them to treat me as though I did not matter. I even intimated that, should they compel me, I will publicly share the complete truth. I knew that his final requirement was for his possible investors to learn about his financial mess. This was my trump card. Fred was furious as my parents seemed as though they had been struck by a truck. Alice merely looked depressed. Though I was tired of being pushed about and of constantly putting Fred's wants second, I didn't want to do this. Telling them they knew how to get to me, I got up, walked out with Aaron. Things have been tough since the conference. Neither my parents nor Fred have heard from each other, hence I'm not sure what they will decide. I am thus simply waiting to find out whether my parents will at last prioritize me or whether this marks the end of our relationship as I know it. Update: my parents contacted out at last after what felt like an eternity. It was the longest 24 hours of my life, and as I waited for their judgment I couldn't concentrate on anything else. I knew nothing about what they would say when my phone rang, and part of me wanted not to hear it. My mother began her apology first. They had thought a lot, she stated following our last talk. They asked me to change the date and came to see how much this wedding meant to me and how cruel they had been. She said she hadn't thought about how much they were hurting me in the process and they had been overly preoccupied trying to save Fred from his most recent catastrophe. She then informed me they had decided to postpone their European vacation. After all, they planned to be at the wedding. Surprised, I had readied myself for the worst since I knew Fred would be chosen once more. It was such relief to hear them select my wedding over the trip. Next my dad answered on the phone to validate what my mother had said. He said he will be there for me on my big day and apologies for not acting sooner. He also said they needed to rethink how they had been managing things as they were beginning to see how much Fred's problems will impact the family. Though it was a start, it was not precisely the sincere apologies I had been expecting for. Most important was that they were traveling to the wedding. I appreciated their choice and our call concluded on an unexpectedly upbeat note. It felt for the first time in a long time, like perhaps things might improve between us. My parents started canceling the Europe trip right away after the decision was made. As you could expect, Fred's reaction to them telling him the trip was canceled was not great. Fred was irate. Almost right away, he called to ask what I had said to our parents to cause them to postpone the trip. I told him I had just told them the truth, that their participation at my wedding meant more to me than anything else and that they had to decide what was more vital. Fred said I was trying to harm his prospects of turning his company around, therefore accusing me of influencing them. He even implied that, driven by jealousy, I was trying to ruin his life. Though it was the same old song and dance I had heard from him a million times before, this time I resisted letting it get to me. I gently informed him that our parents had decided upon their own course and that I had nothing to do with his difficulties. He could be furious with someone, not with me, if he wanted to be angry with someone. Fred then hung up on me and I didn't hear from him for some time. Though I was concerned about how this would impact the wedding day, I was also glad my parents were at last seeing the whole picture. They had decided to be by my side, and that was a positive direction. Over the next several days, my parents began to examine their connection with Fred and me closely. Several times my mother checked in with me and during one of those calls she admitted that she and my dad had been discussing their treatment of us growing up a lot. She said they had always considered Fred as the one who required more help and attention due to his problems, but in doing so they had neglected my needs and taken my freedom for granted. She told me they were starting to understand how much they had harmed me over the years by always putting Fred first. Apparently, my dad brought it up saying they should constantly support Aaron and me rather than only during difficult times. This would help us. Though it was not a 180, it was the first time I had ever heard them freely admit their bias. They committed themselves to treat both of their children equally and to be more present in my life. Though I was unsure of how much of it would really stick, it was a lot to absorb. They were real, and it gave me hope that maybe going forward our relationship may become better. Regarding Fred, he remained enraged, but my parents were resolved not to let that control their behavior anymore. They were beginning to realize that continually rescuing him was not benefiting anyone. Not him, not them, and most certainly not our family as a whole. I never would have imagined hearing them suggesting they would start imposing some limitations on him. Fred obviously did not lie down for any of this. He intensified his efforts to pull my parents back on his side when he understood they were serious about calling off the vacation and attending the wedding. He began threatening our parents in all kinds of ways, including maybe suing them should they not follow through with the trip. He said he would have to sue them for breach of contract, should they fail to assist him with his business. They had pledged to help him. Though I believe Fred knew deep down, it was really an empty threat, and it highlighted his extreme need for their acceptance. Not one of my parents backed down. They advised him that their choice was definite and he had to work out his own issues without depending much on them. For them, this was a significant step, and even if it was difficult for them to challenge Fred, they knew it was essential. Fred continued from there though. He began trying to get other family members on his side by corresponding with them. Claiming that I had coerced our parents into postponing the trip in order to undermine him, he presented me as the villain. With some relatives following Fred's story, it created some conflict inside the extended family. Most of them saw through it and backed my parents' choice to give my wedding top priority. Fred tried his best, but his strategies for manipulation were less successful than they had been. People seemed at last seeing him for who he truly was, a person who was always seeking a handout instead of owning his own mistakes. All of this drama clearly creates a gulf inside the family. Certain of our relatives are firmly on Fred's side, thinking that our parents ought to have honored their word to support him no matter what. Viewed as the spoiled younger sister exploiting her wedding to create distance between the family, they perceive me. Others, particularly those who have seen how Fred's actions have impacted my parents over the years, support their choice to go to the wedding and begin enforcing limits with him. These days, family get-togethers are more contentious and individuals are silently siding. Those who believe I'm in the wrong will judge me. I try not to let that affect me. Aaron has been fantastic in keeping me focused on the positives. That is, that our wedding preparations are still underway and that my parents will be here to assist us. Not easy, but is it? I worry about how this would impact our family over time. Will this divide ever close or will it keep widening till it is too great to span? I know I have to be steadfast in my decisions even though I have no solutions. Especially when it involves compromising my own happiness, I cannot keep stopping backwards to fit everyone else. About Fred, I have no idea what his future holds. He is still looking for a means to salvage his company. Without our parents' financial support, it will be difficult. Aaron and I are concentrating on our wedding and the life we are creating together in the interim. Although the path has been difficult, I hope the changes my family is undergoing will result in a better, more balanced relationship for all of us down the road. Update. Though all the drama preceded the wedding, I wanted this day to be flawless. The day of the wedding eventually arrived. Aaron and I had worked so hard to make it unique, I simply wanted everything to go without incident. Nancy, my maid of honor, who has been my best friend since college, kept reminding me that today was about Aaron and me and that nothing else counted. At the site, a lovely garden estate, Aaron and I had fallen in love with the moment we first laid eyes on it. We were ready. Though I had not spoken to Fred since our previous chat, I knew my folks were on their way. Not sure whether he would show up or not, and the idea of a possible confrontation was weighing on me. The wedding was lovely, and I felt as luckiest person on earth as we exchanged our vows. Looking over at my parents in the front row, I saw my mum cleaning away tears. That was a little but important moment that gave me hope that perhaps we were headed in the correct direction after all. The ceremony itself lived out all I had hoped for. We kept it private, with just close family and friends, and the officiant did a fantastic job of making it seem heartfelt and personal. We snapped pictures in the yard following the ceremony. The setting was really lovely, the light was perfect. While things were still a little awkward, my parents joined us for some family photographs and it was obvious they were really delighted for us. They were trying, and it meant a lot to me. The welcome speeches were moving when it came time. My dad even shocked me with a moving toast in which he apologized for the recent conflict and said he was really pleased of the woman I'd grown to know. For him, it was a significant step and seemed like a fresh start even though it did not wipe out all that had transpired. Fred and Alice arrived just when I believed the day was running without any problems. They hadn't RSVP'd, so I wasn't sure whether they would show at all. They entered the midst of the reception and momentarily the place went quiet. Fred seemed to be carrying proof. He initially went up to our parents, had a little whispered talk with them and then moved over to Aaron and myself. Alice held back, clearly uneasy. Fred congratulated us when he got here, but he was obviously not really here to rejoice. He was there to make a point. Right in the middle of our wedding reception, he wanted to strike up a discussion on his company problems. Even on my wedding day, he seemed unable to tolerate not being the focal point of attention. Aaron moved in before I could speak. Fred was gently reminded by him that today was about celebrating our marriage and that this was not the time or place for business. Fred did not find it appealing. Aaron was not having it as he tried to protest. Fred gave up and turned away finally, but harm was done. I made every effort to ignore it and savor the remainder of the night. We danced, cut the cake and hung about with our loved ones. Though Fred tried to create drama, the evening closed on a good note. Officially, I married the love of my life. Nothing Fred did could take that away from me. Regarding Fred, his life has veered somewhat differently. My parents faced a tough choice following the wedding. They agreed to stop contributing financially. They came to see that continuously rescuing him was not doing him any good and that it was time for him to pay for his mistakes. Fred's company soon closed without our parents' assistance. He looked for additional investors, but those offers dropped through without the trip to Europe. He eventually had to start bankruptcy filings. He had trouble swallowing this harsh pill, hence his pride suffered greatly. At last Alice, who had been mounting annoyance with Fred's financial irresponsibility, reached her breaking point. She picked the children and left him, moving in with her parents as she worked out her future moves. Fred is learning to live alone and must start over in his life. Although I enjoy his demise less, I do believe this is the wake-up call he required. Perhaps now he will begin to take charge of his own life instead of depending on others to resolve issues. Only time will let us know. For Aaron and me, at last we can concentrate on our future free from all the familial strife. We intend to shortly start a family. We had to postpone our European honeymoon as well since all the wedding drama interfered. It seems like the ideal approach to honor our entering into this new phase of life. I want to pause to thank everyone on Reddit for their guidance and encouragement along this insane trip. Your statements gave me the will to defend myself and make some difficult decisions I might have otherwise backed off from. Though it wasn't simple, I'm rather happy I stayed with my guns. I gave my sister-in-law a pregnancy book, unknowingly exposing her affair with my husband's friend. Now the family's in chaos. We know each other since our husbands, Charlie, 26M, sister-in-law Cheryl, 28F, and I, 26F, attended high school together. Charlie and I were in the same year and are sweethearts from high school. We began dating our sophomore year and have been together ever since. With Cheryl, things have always been different. She's always despised me, hence I would want to say we were high school nemesis as the sentiment was reciprocal. She was a senior 2 years older than us, yet that didn't stop her from being absolutely rude to me. She was a vicious bully in high school, and regrettably, not much has changed since then. Only I could stand up to her back in high school. Everyone else was terrified since Cheryl and her buddies were infamous for mistreating anyone they came across. Some people even moved schools because of their terrible deeds or spreading of tales. They were that horrible. I am not exaggerating. I never feared her, even before Charlie and I began dating. I had always been acquainted with her brother. Cheryl didn't seem like this undefeatable entity to me as he and I had been great friends and I often stayed out at his house. She seemed like any other child. That's how everyone ought to have seen her, in my opinion, but high school can be weird. Still, I wasn't scared of Cheryl. Once I started dating Charlie, I became even more bold. She probably felt powerless over me, even as a senior, and this disturbed her. She once did something truly terrible to me. As usual, one morning upon opening my locker, dead fish and a lot of fish water dropped on me. Head to toe I was covered in nasty, sticky slime. I had to go home since I was so offended and it was embarrassing and demoralizing. Though I couldn't prove Cheryl was behind it, I felt it had to be her. We had a severe verbal argument in the cafeteria the day before. I labeled her a brain-dead zombie in front of her friends, some of whom even laughed. She did this to me since she couldn't let that go. Charlie felt it had to be his sister too, and their argument turned out really intense. He managed to convince her to back off even though he cannot get her to apologize to me. Though Charlie and I have been together for years, Cheryl and I never spoke once that incident occurred. But once Charlie and I got married last year, my in-laws informed Cheryl and me that since we were now family, we had to try more to get along. Some nosy relatives had been questioning our lack of communication or simply glancing at each other during family events, which embarrassed them. Having gone far from high school, I was ready to let the past pass. I agreed to be polite. Cheryl and I shook hands like grown-ups. Though we chose to be friendly at family functions rather than avoid one another, we were not going to be best friends overnight. Things appeared to be going good a year ago. We would say hi and then go on whenever we ran across each other. We had left the bad blood behind us, so I assumed, but then she became cruel once more. She showed up empty-handed on my birthday some few months earlier, which was okay. She then told me she was actually teaching me cooking classes and emailed me an online program she had bought at the party itself while I was opening everyone's gifts. She said it was meant to be a joke, but nobody else laughed and I didn't either. For background, I had done all the cooking for the day alone, hence it was quite nasty. I have always loved working in the kitchen and experimenting even though I am not a professional chef. Since childhood, cooking has been a pastime of mine. Her comment, she was going to give me cooking lessons, was quite nasty, right after she had eaten a whole dinner I had made. As Charlie had pointed out, everyone knew I produced everything. I took it to heart since I had worked hard and woke up at 6:30 a.m. to make sure everything was perfect. No one truly laughed even once she explained it as a joke. She persisted even though several people laughed merely to let her drop it. She kept insisting she was kidding, but she really thought I should have culinary classes since everything she had eaten that day made her feel sick and she kept saying she might throw up at any time. She also made jokes on how everyone should clear the path to the bathroom should she have to barf. She was truly approaching my last nerve at the end of the evening, and I felt relief when she left. She didn't even bother bidding farewell after spending the whole day cracking jokes at the expense of my cooking abilities, which, by the way, aren't particularly horrible. Charlie and everyone else told me the food was fantastic, hence I have no idea what she was talking about. To be honest, I had begun to believe she might be a decent human being, but after my birthday I chose to resume neglect of her. She obviously still lived in her high school mean girl form, and someone like her had no right to be friendly with me. Cheryl had her birthday last week. She had to invite me even if we are not getting along since I asked her to my party. Charlie traveling without me would have been strange, hence she invited me in order to maintain family peace. That proved to be rather a blunder. I chose to let her taste her own medication. Based on a few weeks old overheard talk, I handed her the book What to Expect When You're Expecting Asterisk. For background, Cheryl came up to our place 3 weeks ago. She insisted on talking to Charlie in private and appeared depressed. She didn't realize I was standing immediately outside listening in on their conversation. I left the room to let them chat in the living room. Though I knew it wasn't moral, I was intrigued and wanted to listen in so Charlie could cover for me when she left. Cheryl was pregnant, per what I understood, but she was truly concerned as she felt unprepared to be pregnant. She had come to consult her brother. Charlie advised her to talk to her spouse even if she felt unprepared. Given that the pregnancy was early, they may discuss ending it should she still feel unprepared. He reasoned that chatting to her husband could allow her to relax and take better control of the circumstances. Cheryl left after briefly consoling her. I told Charlie what I had overheard as she left. We both agreed she had been behaving oddly. She appeared strange coming to us instead of her husband even if she wasn't ready for a baby. She said some things that nearly sounded like she needed Charlie's assistance in covertly ending the pregnancy, but he wasn't ready to engage in such dishonest behavior. He thought her husband ought to know before any decisions were taken. Though ultimately the woman's decision is hers, we felt her spouse at least deserved to be included in the conversation given she was married. We had not heard anything else regarding her pregnancy since that day. Still, I decided to pull a small practical joke on her and handed her that book. Fortunately, she did not unwrap the gifts in front of every visitor at the party, yet it made no difference since the book truly got her into trouble. Her husband might thus eventually find himself leaving her. She called me in tears the day after her birthday, stating I had destroyed her life and charged me with purposefully undermining her marriage. What she was talking about eluded me. She was so enraged and was screaming at me, so I couldn't even get her to clarify what was happening. She hung up silently, done, without further word. Following that phone chat, my in-laws got in touch and reported exactly what had happened. She apparently had been unwrapping all of her gifts with her husband and then that book surfaced. I had even left a note stating that Charlie and I wished to congratulate her and affixed it to the book. She hadn't told anyone yet about the pregnancy, but I wanted to play about with her the way she had done on my birthday. I had no clue it would have such dire results. She could not have become pregnant by her spouse since he was sterile. This was unknown to her. She apparently may have been cheating now, and her spouse had already shown suspicion. That book served to validate his misgivings. Though none of the family members know for sure whether she had been cheating or not, let's be honest, she most certainly wasn't biologically incapable of having children. In any case, that is not my line of work. All I know is she had come to Charlie thinking he would assist her covertly in ending the pregnancy. Now we know why she wanted to keep it a secret and why she was so queasy when she spoke with him. She cannot let that happen if she wanted to end the pregnancy without her husband knowing, since she is a homemaker and everything she spends might be followed by him. Even pulling money would be suspect, as it would be a large sum that would beg problems. Cheryl made a great effort to persuade her husband that I was merely teasing and that nothing was happening. He disagreed when she claimed the book was only a hoax. Unless there was some truth to it, he doubted Charlie and I would pull such a joke. He then requested Cheryl to leave, and today she lives with her parents. My in-laws asked me to talk to her husband and persuade him that I had only handed her the book to play about with. Given his suspicions of her adultery, they believed I might get him to approach her and fix things. Her fidelity now begged additional questions. I disagree since they think I should not have done what I did and that I'm at blame. For the past week, my in-laws and I have been at conflict. Given her behavior at my birthday celebration, I believe I was justified in what I did. I don't think I should accept the fall for this as I had no idea it would cause so much trouble. She most certainly should have been faithful to her husband if she wanted peace in her marriage. To hold me responsible for it is unfair. Charlie has the same sentiment. Though he believes the present was a little excessive given the events of my birthday celebration, he does not advise me to apologize to Cheryl or even talk to her husband about any of this. Saying we should resolve things since her marriage is in jeopardy, my in-laws keep fighting with us. They believe that should we fail to persuade her spouse that this was only a joke, the family may suffer from divorce. She most certainly was cheating though, if she was pregnant when she spoke with Charlie and her husband is sterile. Should that be the case, we want no involvement whatsoever or defense of her. Apart from that, the book was only vengeance for the jokes she cracked at my birthday. I had no clue it would result in anything like this. I have nothing to be guilty over. It is not like I did it on intention. Still, they all seem to be behaving as though I'm the villain, the mastermind behind a sinister scheme meant to wipe her off target or otherwise. It's very strange. Suddenly I'm questioning my choices. AITA kindly sent a pregnancy book as a birthday present to my sister-in-law. Update 1, Hi, so it's been 2 weeks since I handed Cheryl that book, and up until now we have avoided talking to her husband. From what we know, she had been cheating on her husband with another man, hence going forward we will also keep to that. Though I'm not sure specifically, I believe it's someone from high school. Worse, I believe it's someone from Charlie's acquaintance group since a few days ago we spoke, more of an argument, on the phone with Cheryl. She stated it was quite unjust that she was being held accountable for all of this, but Charlie's friend was equally culpable. However, he wasn't getting any criticism and was even unwilling to defend her. Though we don't know exactly who she's referring to, Charlie has quite a few married pals from high school. That's not really our main concern. Managing my in-laws has proved somewhat challenging. I don't believe they have done it yet. They insist I should chat to her spouse before he files for divorce. He keeps telling he'll do it, but if he truly wants to split, he should have done it now. What he is waiting for is unknown to me. Anyway, they believe they still have time and that, if I only talk to him, I could be able to persuade him not to leave her by stating I was only doing a practical joke. I have nothing to do with all of this drama, hence I refuse to allow myself to get caught in it. Though they have been making it somewhat challenging for us, I simply want to back off and relax. Thus, yesterday we had to make a really difficult choice and ultimately block all three of them since they were slightly disturbing us. We can't keep talking to them, trying to help them to grasp where we are coming from. Over 2 weeks have passed. She was truly a bully to me in high school, yet many of the people in the comments on my first post felt it was unacceptable of me to do what I did. She had been cheating, hence I doubt I have to feel guilty about what I did. Still, folks are free to disagree with me in this free nation. Update 2. Hi. 3 days have passed since our last report and at last we were able to identify the person she had been having the affair with. Charlie's friend she mentioned turned out to be among his closest pals. This surprised me somewhat a bit. Because his family was acting somewhat irrationally, Charlie had been complaining to his pals about how challenging things had been for him the past 2 weeks. I suppose his pal chose to come clean as he couldn't tolerate it anymore. He called Charlie and told him he had been seeing Cheryl in an affair. Apparently, all of this began roughly 1 year ago, just around our wedding's time. For us, it was really startling and we are still trying to understand it. Charlie is quite close to every one of his buddies, hence we never expected a betrayal like this. From what we have seen, this guy, who has been married for 3 years, and his wife seem to be truly in love. I personally know the woman. She talks endlessly about her husband. Right now, I just feel somewhat sorry for her. We decided straight away to cut him off, and right now we are not telling anyone since we do not want to discredit him. But we will most certainly not be entertaining this going forward. We even told him to tell his wife straightforward since she is the one who really needs to know the truth. Nobody should ever have to go through what this is like. He also supplied us with evidence of Cheryl cheating on her spouse alongside him. We have come to the conclusion that, at least nothing good would come of it if we allowed ourselves to be pulled into this play. Hence, our last call is keeping them blocked. To what we know, they have not discussed this with anyone else. Everyone still believes we get along well with my in-laws and that Charlie's relatives know nothing about the turmoil underway behind the scene. Given the circumstances, which would be somewhat embarrassing for the family, I'm betting they are keeping things under wraps in order to protect their name. Though I suppose it's a surface motivation, I value their great concern for their perceived image. We don't want to deal with other people right now, and it's helping us keep everything secret. As it is, we have sufficient on our plates. Charlie's cousin is getting married in a few weeks, hence they will have to go to that wedding. We're not sure whether my in-laws or Cheryl will be there given the present circumstances, but if they decide to go, boy, that will be quite strange for everyone concerned. Update 3. Hey, practically 2 months after my last update is here. Not truly intriguing events occurred in these previous 2 months. We sort of forgot about my in-laws once we cut them off. Their end also lacked news, hence they did not try to get in touch with us. We thought perhaps Cheryl and her husband had been able to sort things out as neither a pregnancy announcement nor a divorce announcement was made. Good for them, then I suppose. Charlie and I know that adultery never stays secret, thus we don't care about what's happening in their marriage. When her husband finds out the truth, she will most certainly receive what she deserves. Regarding the pregnancy, I suppose she stopped it some way. In any case, we didn't bother ourselves with it and kept to our own business as whatever happened is not of importance to us. That was till we visited his family at his cousin's wedding some few days ago. Including Cheryl's spouse and my in-laws, all of them were present. Once we arrived, we acted as though the others did not exist and neglected even greeting each other. Clearly, the rest of the family noticed it right away. People began posing all kinds of inquiries to us. Though they attempted to be subdued about it, we knew they were gathering gossip. But we simply tried to keep to ourselves so nobody would disturb us. We did not entertain anyone. Cheryl, on the other hand, followed a different strategy. She chose to blab her mouth off even though we knew the facts. We were ready to put up with her since we were 3 days at the hotel and it was just a matter of time till we returned home. But she began to say such terrible things about us that we had to confront her about it. Sadly, that resulted in a somewhat public confrontation between our families during the rehearsal dinner. It was someone else's wedding, hence I regret it as Charlie and his cousin got along well. Now one of the events was totally destroyed thanks to us. Naturally, following such a spectacle, we had to leave before the wedding even started since we couldn't stay much longer. We have since apologized multiple times to his cousin. She has indicated she is cool with it, but we still feel quite horrible about what happened. Cheryl and my in-laws, on the other hand, were really in charge of generating all of this turmoil, yet they hardly bothered to apologize to Charlie's cousin. At least we departed of our own will. The other family members practically urged them to go after we departed. Serves them right, they were due this kind of shame. It was pretty fulfilling for both of us when Charlie's cousin told him about it the day before her wedding as we were phoning her apologies. Cheryl had been telling all the family, and everyone who would listen that we had tried to destroy her marriage by lying about her adultery, therefore leading us to a fight in the first place. She said we failed in trying to undermine her marriage. Clearly, that was untrue since, as we indicated, her marriage life is not something we give much thought to. Choosing to live with a lady like her husband had shown how dumb he was. We were even ready to let that slip since we were attending someone else's wedding and we wanted to avoid starting a scene. She then began asserting, though, that we were the ones having an open marriage and that I wanted to get close to her husband, which explained why I'd always been so envious of her. We couldn't live with that. We resolved to face her then. I mentioned all the evidence, the screenshots we had gotten from Charlie's friend, which I had been saving to myself for so long on the evening of the rehearsal dinner. Charlie and I now felt, nonetheless, that it was at last time to defend ourselves. She could not simply say anything she pleased and get away with it. Her husband can no longer ignore reality since he at last knows it. His call is whether or not he takes the correct decision for himself and leaves her. At least now there will be no more questioning of us. At least we left on our own with courtesy, avoiding being thrown out as others were. Though we are now attempting to move over it, it was just a really awful few days. The whole family knows Cheryl's type of person she is, thus I just feel sympathy for her husband as he decided to mend things with her even though it was useless. I truly hope he gets the bravery to escape. Should he decide to remain with her, then he just has absolutely no decency or self-respect. We eventually decided to go ahead and sabotage her marriage as she had been accusing us of for so long. She will now have to pay for trying to bully us. How she planned to get away with all of this is unknown. Since high school, Charlie and I have literally been standing up to Mom. I believe we have made it really evident that we are not scared of her. We were not thus going to back down either right now. She ought to have known that. Update 4. Consequently, it is happening. 2 weeks have passed since our return from Charlie's cousin's wedding, and today I at last heard from a couple of cousins Cheryl wrote about her and her husband divorcing. She said that it was a mutual decision to split ways and urged everyone to honor their privacy during this trying period. What a weight of lies this baggage carries. She's behaving as people weren't present at the wedding and like her entire family isn't aware of what actually happened and the real reason they're divorcing, hence I'm not sure why she's acting like we all already know, hence we will definitely be honoring her privacy. No one has to ask her what happened. The talk began when Charlie told some of his pals, thus even her friends have learned about it. We regret nothing about what we did. She had been spewing so much garbage about us in the past that we hardly need to feel guilty about what we did or regret her. Should she go low, we will go lower as well. Period is. She has always been a bully, thus we believe we did the correct thing as someone needed her down a peg. We are happy to be the ones doing that. If that makes some people view us as the bad guys, that is okay with us. For example, my in-laws have chosen to totally cut us off from their life. They even had their attorney get in touch with Charlie to let him know they had opted to avoid us and most likely would cut us off from the inheritance as well. As like we were going to learn that and start begging for pardon right away. That is not going to transpire. We are not money-based sellouts that one could purchase. Besides, since Cheryl hasn't worked since she graduated and has been depending on either her parents or her husband, they should most likely retain all their money to themselves, presumably for the rest of their lifetime. Thus, yes, they may keep their money and Cheryl with herself by all means. We behaved what we believed to be right. We are not going to act as though we are sorry for it. Right now, Charlie and I are quite happy with our life. We have no interest in anyone else. Years after my brother evicted me for his growing family, he now wants to move into my home. Am I the asshole for refusing to help? Alright, this is a long one, and I honestly need an outside perspective. Several years ago, I, 28F, was living with my older brother Tom, 37M, and his wife Karen, 34F. I had just graduated from college, had a pretty bad job at the time, and was struggling to make ends meet. Tom had a house with a guest room, and he told me I could stay with them for a while until I got back on my feet. I was beyond grateful, and I made sure to help out however I could, cooking, cleaning, buying groceries when I could afford it. Fast forward about 6 months. I finally landed a decent job and was able to contribute more financially. I was on my way to becoming independent. Around this time, Karen got pregnant. At first, everything seemed fine, but then Karen started dropping subtle hints that they needed more space for the baby. The hints soon turned into direct conversations about how they needed the guest room for a nursery. Tom assured me that I could stay until I found a new place, but Karen was clearly becoming more agitated by the day. Then, one afternoon, I came home from work to find all my stuff packed up and sitting in the hallway. Tom told me that Karen had decided they needed me out ASAP. No discussion, no warning. He tried to soften the blow by saying they'd help me with a security deposit on a new place, but it was humiliating and hurtful. I ended up couch surfing for a couple of months until I could afford a small studio apartment. It was a really tough time for me, both emotionally and financially. I'll never forget the feeling of being thrown out of my own brother's house like that. Fast forward to now. Tom's life has taken a turn. His business went under, and they're having financial issues. Last week, he called me out of the blue, sounding desperate. They're being evicted from their house and have nowhere to go. He asked if he, Karen, and their 2 kids could stay with me for a few months, while they get back on their feet. Here's the thing. I'm doing much better now. I have a good job, a nice apartment, and I've been saving for a house. I can technically accommodate them, but the thought of letting them move in after what they did to me years ago just doesn't sit right. I told Tom I needed to think about it, and ever since, he's been sending me guilt-trippy texts about how family is supposed to be there for each other, and how they have nowhere else to go. Even my parents have gotten involved, saying I should let them stay with me because they're family, and what happened years ago is in the past. But here's the kicker. Karen hasn't apologized once for how they treated me. Not a word. She didn't even acknowledge it when we spoke on the phone. It's like they expect me to just forget about it and welcome them with open arms. I'm torn. Part of me feels like I should help because they are my family, but the other part of me feels like this is karmic justice. Am I the asshole for refusing to let them stay with me after what they did? Or should I let the past go and help them out in their time of need? After 10 years together, I'm ending my relationship with the woman I love because she wants kids and I don't. Am I the asshole? Original post. I, 31M, have known her, 29F, since we were teenagers? We got together 10 years ago, and have been living together for a bit over 7. It's been the perfect relationship in pretty much every way, We support each other through everything, we have fun together, she's my best friend and I'm hers. We're as intensely in love as we've ever been. We've discussed marriage a bunch through the years. As of a few years ago it wasn't either of us cup of tea, but more recently she has expressed an interest in tying the knot. I don't really have an interest in marriage as a concept, but as I was intent on spending my life with her either way, if she needed a ring and a wedding I was more than willing to accommodate her. As of around half a year ago, I was in the planning stages of a proposal, and had even started to look for a ring. I didn't spoil the eventual surprise, but based on our conversations on the matter I don't think it would have been very unexpected to her if I'd popped the question. If anything, she must be wondering what's taking so long, at this point. But our desires for the future have diverged in another way, that I can't just compromise over. She wants to be a mother, and I don't want to be a father. Much like marriage, for much of our relationship she didn't have such a desire, but now she does. Unlike marriage, however, parenting is not just a symbolic thing I can accommodate her on. She didn't pressure me to change my mind, but she has tried to gauge whether there was wiggle room on my end, whether I could see my opinion on the matter change. I can't. At this point, she has accepted that. I could pop into a jewelry store tomorrow, pick out a ring, propose to her at the next opportunity. She would say yes and a while later we'd be married, still on our way to spending our lives together. Even though she knows we will not have children together. She may still hold out hope I'll change my mind. I can't know for certain either way, of course. I'd get to be with her probably forever, which is really all I want. But, she wants to be a mother. Not only has she expressed it to me, it has been painfully obvious in the way she is around our friends and relatives' babies and children, or in the way she awkwardly brushes off her mother's comments about waiting for grandchildren. It really is plain to see. I couldn't miss it if I tried and, trust me, for a while I did. So I have to let her go. Or, since she has not exactly been trying to leave me, I guess a more accurate way to phrase it is that I have to push her away. I have considered the other options. There's the selfish option, which really just involves staying with her, never giving her a child. I wouldn't even have to coerce her into this or lie about my stance on the subject, but every parent I've asked has gushed about parenting being the most fulfilling experience they've gone through. And for some of them I saw firsthand the exact same tells that they wanted to start a family that I now see with my girlfriend. I can't be the person taking that away from her. There's also a part of me that just fears she'd resent and leave me later on. Then there's the option of committing to eventually become a father, for her. Maybe someday I'd even be thankful I did it. For me, after all, some of the parents I've polled also said they weren't always keen to have children. Some still had doubts even while expecting, and yet it still ended up being that wonderful, fulfilling experience they all described. But even as I type this, even as I try to convince myself I actually believe this, I just don't. And while I've asked for happy parents and healthy family units, there are also plenty of unhappy ones, or just shit ones, in this world. I think the least that every child deserves is to be wanted by both of their parents, and I can't see myself go through with this if there's even a chance that I won't meet even that very low bar. Even less so since I believe that chance to be quite high. I've pondered variations of those two main ones too. Waiting it out and hoping she changes her mind. Maybe being an aunt or a godmother, both are likely to happen within the next couple years, in the future can be enough, but they all seem like rolls of the dice, whose results will only be known years from now. When she expressed the desire to start a family, it was as a plan for a few years into the future. If that is to happen, without me, then I need to do this now. I've already procrastinated, simply pausing my plans for a proposal when I first realized how much she really wanted this, hoping a better answer would magically appear before me. But I can't just kick this can down the road forever. I've set the date, which is tomorrow. I will tell her I want to separate. I will tell her why as I have here. I have prepared myself in case she pushes back, tells me she doesn't want this, believes me to be lying about my reasons, pleads me to reconsider. I think my resolve is strong enough to hold no matter what she throws at me. I expect this to be a shock to her. As I said, she's likely to expect me to pop the question rather than to end things. I know I'm going to break her heart and I fucking hate myself for it. I'm also going to break mine, but I guess that's on me. I've already made plans for the aftermath. I know where I'll be staying for a short while after this, so I'll be out of her hair. I've laid out some options for longer-term living arrangements. I already know that everyone around us, my own family included, is gonna think I'm either an asshole or a complete moron. I doubt I'll get much in the way of empathy, but I also won't be looking for it. Can't plan for everything though. Figuring out how to live without her gonna be a bitch. Full transparency, I started writing this hoping I'd talk myself out of pulling that trigger. Hoping that typing it all out would reveal the magical answer I've been hoping for. But it hasn't. If anything, it has reinforced what I already knew. Edit. Some of you are pointing out that I'm taking a choice out of her hands when it should be her decision, or at least a joint one. I actually agree. But for months now I haven't been able to shake off the feeling that leaving that choice to her is in some ways cruel. Can you imagine leaving the one you love, shattering their heart, so you can then seek something they couldn't give you elsewhere? The only reason I can make that decision is because yes, I'll be hurting her, but in the hope that she gets something she wants, that I can't give her, out of it. If the roles were reversed, I could never leave her for my own benefit. I know it's still unfair for me to just take away her agency in this. I feel shit about it. I feel shit about a ton of things right now. I'll feel even worse tomorrow. But I don't know what else I can do that doesn't force an impossible choice on her. Edit 2. So this got a wide range of responses. Some of you agree. Some of you think I should be more nuanced in my approach. Some are being really weird and trying to shove sexism into this, or making up fanfiction that twists this into me just looking for an excuse to break up with her. Some also are saying I should just force myself to have children, which I feel are the most bonkers takes. Lots of you are also saying I need a vasectomy. And yes, that is something I plan to do. Among the criticisms saying I shouldn't just make that decision, a lot of you are saying I need to clarify to her how certain I am that I don't want children. I did mention that, maybe I didn't make it clear enough, but that has already happened. She has talked to me about it, about whether there was any chance I'd change my mind. I have been as clear as I could have been that there was not. And she has accepted it and made her choice to stay with me despite that. These are things that have already happened. But despite making that choice, it has been clear, painfully so, that she still does want children. That is why I'm taking the decision out of her hands. Maybe I'm as dumb or as big an asshole as some of you are saying. Maybe I'm gonna ruin both our lives for no good reason. But there is no point at this stage in restating my stance and pawning the choice off on her again. I think the choice she made will make her unhappy in the long term, and I think I have to do what I'm going to do. There's nothing else to it. P.S. Do not expect or await any further update. Edit 3. In my second and last edit to the original post, I told people not to expect an update. Frankly, I didn't think I'd want to write one, nor did I really think I'd have anything much to say. Things didn't exactly work out how I thought and said they would, so here I am. I did approach her last Saturday. I expressed what had been troubling me and explained to her why I thought we should go our separate ways. As I thought it would, it came as a shock to her. She told me that while she had been wanting to start a family with me, she thought she'd made it clear that she'd chosen me over that prospect, fully aware it would not happen. She emphasized that the with me part was essential to her, that she couldn't picture it any other way. I told her that I was aware of the choice she'd made, but that I did not want to be the reason she'd miss out on being a parent. That while I'm sure she didn't make that call lightly, that I can tell she still wishes to have children. She did confirm that wasn't a desire that had just disappeared, that it was still there, and that while that's true, I can only see her choice to stay with me leading to regret and resentment for her. I'm not going to retell the whole discussion, those are the very rough broad strokes of both of our core positions, but it lasted hours, went through a range of arguments and emotions, cries on both sides, anger and distrust that I was being honest about my reasons on hers. I'd written in the original post that I thought I had the resolve to end things with her no matter what. As it turned out, maybe it came from a lack of resolve, or maybe she just got through to me and it would have just been stubbornness not to listen. But at the end of it, we agreed on just taking time apart from one another for the foreseeable future. On her part, she promised me she would truly take that time to think about all of it, to re-examine her feelings in depth. On mine, I committed to accepting her choice. The argument that convinced me was that this would be the first time in over a decade, the first time since we properly became adults, that we wouldn't be in each other's life, and that if the gain of perspective from being apart didn't change her mind, that had to mean something. Trying to see things rationally, I think the reasoning is sound. On a more emotional level, I cannot say I'm 100% certain I'm not just convincing myself of that, but overall I do think it's the way to go. The fact that, at this point, I don't know what she'll decide is one thing that makes me believe this was right. It also scares the shit out of me because, one of the two options is that I lose her. Might be dumb since I was ready to end it, but thinking about that prospect did and still does wreck me. Based on the responses I got last time, I'd wager many of you will think I was wrong to agree to this. Others advised exactly this, so maybe they'll be happy. Others, I'm sure, will still think I'm an asshole. Hopefully, this will turn out to be the right choice, whatever her decision ends up being. We have not set an exact time frame. I've asked that she take at least a few months, as that sounds like a good minimum, and more importantly that she takes as long as she needs. We, obviously, won't be living together anymore. I'm currently staying at a hotel, But, her decision. She will soon, a matter of days, move out of our apartment, at which point I'll move back in. From that point on, we will have no contact with one another at all, except for very strict exceptions which will hopefully not arise, emergencies, personal tragedies. And that's pretty much it. I miss her already. The next while is gonna suck. The aftermath may also suck, but then again this doesn't suck any worse than I was expecting the aftermath of the definitive breakup I thought would happen would suck. I don't want to promise an update that will tell you how it all ends. That is months away, and I don't know that I'll be in a sharing mood. And that's even if this ends with good news. Sorry for that. Hopefully I will though. Update 1. In my second and last edit to the original post, I told people not to expect an update. Frankly, I didn't think I'd want to write one, nor did I really think I'd have anything much to say. Things didn't exactly work out how I thought and said they would, so here I am. I did approach her last Saturday. I expressed what had been troubling me, and explained to her why I thought we should go our separate ways. As I thought it would, it came as a shock to her. She told me that while she had been wanting to start a family with me, she thought she'd made it clear that she'd chosen me over that prospect, fully aware it would not happen. She emphasized that the with me part was essential to her, that she couldn't picture it any other way. I told her that I was aware of the choice she'd made, but that I did not want to be the reason she'd miss out on being a parent. That while I'm sure she didn't make that call lightly, that I can tell she still wishes to have children, she did confirm that wasn't a desire that had just disappeared, that it was still there. And that while that's true, I can only see her choice to stay with me leading to regret and resentment for her. I'm not going to retell the whole discussion. Those are the very rough broad strokes of both of our core positions, but it lasted hours, went through a range of arguments and emotions, cries on both sides, anger and distrust that I was being honest about my reasons on hers. I'd written in the original post that I thought I had the resolve to end things with her no matter what. As it turned out, maybe it came from a lack of resolve, or maybe she just got through to me and it would have just been stubbornness not to listen. But at the end of it we agreed on just taking time apart from one another for the foreseeable future. On her part she promised me she would truly take that time to think about all of it. To re-examine her feelings in depth. On mine I committed to accepting her choice. The argument that convinced me was that this would be the first time in over a decade, the first time since we properly became adults, that we wouldn't be in each other's life, and that if the gain of perspective from being apart didn't change her mind, that had to mean something. Trying to see things rationally, I think the reasoning is sound. On a more emotional level, I cannot say I'm 100% certain I'm not just convincing myself of that, but overall I do think it's the way to go. The fact that, at this point, I don't know what she'll decide is one thing that makes me believe this was right. It also scares the shit out of me because, one of the two options is that I lose her. Might be dumb since I was ready to end it, but thinking about that prospect did and still does wreck me. Based on the responses I got last time, I'd wager many of you will think I was wrong to agree to this. Others advised exactly this, so maybe they'll be happy. Others, I'm sure, will still think I'm an asshole. Hopefully, this will turn out to be the right choice, whatever her decision ends up being. We have not set an exact time frame. I've asked that she take at least a few months as that sounds like a good minimum, and more importantly that she takes as long as she needs. We, obviously, won't be living together anymore. I'm currently staying at a hotel, but, her decision, she will soon, a matter of days, move out of our apartment, at which point I'll move back in. From that point on, we will have no contact with one another at all, except for very strict exceptions which will hopefully not arise, emergencies, personal tragedies. And that's pretty much it. I miss her already. The next while is gonna suck. The aftermath may also suck. But then again this doesn't suck any worse than I was expecting the aftermath of the definitive breakup I thought would happen would suck. I don't want to promise an update that will tell you how it all ends. That is months away, and I don't know that I'll be in a sharing mood. And that's even if this ends with good news. Sorry for that. Hopefully I will though. Update 2. So, I'm not quite sure how many people remember and/or care about my original posts. They're still up on my profile if you need a refresher. But either way, here it comes. First off, I did break our no contact policy once. A couple of weeks in, I reached out to let her know about my intent to get a vasectomy, which happened a few weeks after that. It was a short conversation. She told me she did expect I might want to do that. We both confessed to missing the other, and that's pretty much it. I hadn't told her before our break because I'm skittish about medical procedures and was still reading up on and talking myself into it, and I didn't wait till after, because I felt that was information that could help her reflection, and also didn't like the idea of either delaying the procedure for an unknown amount of time or going through with it behind her back, if that makes sense. Now, On to the conclusion to all of this. I won't keep you in suspense any longer. My partner and I are back together and have been for some weeks. Aside from my transgression, we had no contact with one another for the duration of the outbreak, until she reached out to me saying she had made her decision and asking if we could meet later that day, at our place. Technically just mine at that point, but you get it. Once she got there, she talked me through what she'd been doing during our time apart. She explained that at first she needed some time adjusting to life without me, not just in the sense of missing me as a person but also of not having a partner for the first time in a decade. Our experiences in that regard were rather similar. I guess we'd both grown to be somewhat codependent. Once she was past that, she started exploring her feelings on parenthood. One thing she did was talk about it with friends and relatives, both with parents, future parents as well as child-free couples, talking about their experience, about how they came to end up where they did. She also made a point to spend time with children, babysitting for friends semi-regularly and stuff like that. There was also a lot of pure introspection, thinking about her feelings as well as our relationship. She told me that while she does love being around children, she can confidently say that she doesn't need children of her own, and that she would rather be with the right person. Lucky for me, she still thinks I'm that person. While we both had to shed a bit of our codependency, the yearning and love for one another didn't go away or dim for either of us. Back to her thoughts on children and not having them, she said that she'd still have children in her life. Her brother and his wife are planning to start a family soon. My own sister, who is on good terms with my partner, already has one. And that would be enough to fulfill that part of her. She said she was sure and asked if I was going to be able to accept her decision. I said yes and thanked her for respecting my own decision not to have children and still wanting to be with me. We also talked about how worthwhile each of us felt this time apart had been. She said that while it ultimately didn't change her mind, it reinforced it, and she said that she could understand why I needed that added certainty. She did add that she wished I'd been more open to her about this whole thing before I'd essentially convinced myself to end things with her, that she felt communication had before been a strong point of our relationship and that it did hurt to be blindsided. I committed to doing better in the future should any such circumstances arise. And that's kind of it. We've fallen back into our relationship dynamic pretty seamlessly. She's back living with me in our apartment. We've been making up for lost time, catching up on what the other had been up to, and made a point to have what I'd call an above-average amount of romantic evenings and such since we got back together. Really though, the romance is nice, just being with her again has been bliss. Her 30th birthday is coming up over the summer and we've made plans for a 2-week getaway somewhere sunny to celebrate, just the two of us. We will also have a thing with friends and family once we're back, but we'll be away for the day proper. Not our first time vacationing together of course, but kind of pulling out all the stops on this one. I'm also considering maybe popping the question then, but I first want to sound out that it is still what she wants. Hopefully I don't completely ruin the surprise trying to figure that out. I'd like to thank those who left comments or reached out in DMs, whether they were messages of support, advice or criticism. I was not in the ideal mindset to accept feedback after my initial submission, but I did find worth in a lot of what I dismissed at the time, rereading those threads, the ones I made but also on another sub they were reposted to, during the past months. This will hopefully be the last update, but I'll try to answer a few comments. My fiancé proposed while I was on the toilet, and my friends called it weird. Now I'm questioning if our sweet engagement story was really awkward. Original post. It's not as bad as it sounds. My friends are just obsessed with that part. I think. Fake names. My 32F fiancé Peter, 30M, had arranged a candlelight dinner in a hotel room. There were flowers, rose petals, and music. There was my favorite dinner and my favorite dessert. Peter was in a tuxedo. I was wearing a dress. That evening was so amazing. While I was eating, my IBS started acting up. I ran to the bathroom. It was mortifying, but at least I was comfortable enough with Peter to allow him to come in. I was apologizing for ruining our evening while I was on the toilet, and he said it's okay. I felt like he wanted to ask me to marry him the whole evening. I told him I love him, and he said I love you too. I told him, I'm sure you'll take care of me in sickness and in health. That comment made Peter smile and he got down on one knee. I didn't care that this was the situation. I was so happy to say yes. I felt like he wouldn't have asked that evening if I didn't say the sickness and health comment. I told my best friend Kate, 33F, and another friend Bailey, 33F. I told them the truth. Kate said it's weird, creepy, and an asshole move on his part. I explained that he likely would have put it off if I didn't mean the health comment. Kate said I was desperate, and that I should have some respect for myself. Bailey said, if I thought Peter would ask another time, then I should have let him ask another time. Before talking to them, I thought I had the sweetest proposal story. Now I feel like an asshole who caused my amazing fiancé to have a terrible story. Am I the asshole? Update and further context. The proposal happened on Saturday, and I had been holding off telling my parents and Peter's parents. Both sets of parents live in a different state. Tonight, we told my parents first via video chat. My parents are Bob, 58M, and Susan, 58F. My mom is a massive fan of romance, and I knew she would ask about the proposal. Peter and I told my parents the whole proposal story. My mom was over the moon. She said proposing like that is better than any idea she had. My dad said it just proves the love Peter has for me. My mom asked if she could tell others, and I said sure. I had asked my mom to be my maid of honor. After getting engaged, my pick for maid of honor was either going to be Kate or my mom. I didn't pick my mom to spite Kate. I'm not punishing Kate. Kate's initial reaction to the proposal story would just make her being the maid of honor awkward. Plus my mom is so happy with our union, and she would love to plan a wedding. Then we told Peter's parents via video chat. His parents are Chuck, 55M, and Linda, 59F. His parents really appreciated the comedy. Chuck thanked us for giving them the gift of telling that amazing story, if we're comfortable with that. I told him we're confused. Linda said she's so happy for us. Peter told his father that he wants him to be the best man. Lastly, we told Peter's sister Juliana, 27F, via video chat as she lives in another state. She had her father's sense of humor. I hope Kate and Bailey will be bridesmaids. Yes, Kate and Bailey are single. I have been best friends with Kate since the 9th grade, so this little disagreement wouldn't ruin our friendship. Further update. Kate and Bailey both agreed to be bridesmaids when I asked via message. Kate apologized via message, and she also sent me a video of her apologizing. Kate said she appreciates that I'm still letting her be a key part of the wedding. She said that after several days of thinking about the proposal, she realizes how loving it was. She said if she had IBS, she would appreciate a guy who treats her like how Peter treats me. Bailey apologized via message. Her apology was brief, and she admitted in it that Kate told her to apologize. Update. Thank you to all the amazing people who gave me support on my original post. After Kate's apology message and apology video, I messaged back that I forgave her with a link to my original post. She said she really wanted to talk face to face. We went to the gym today even though I was feeling like I was going to get an IBS flare-up. We talked while we worked out. Kate said that she was upset when she heard my proposal story, and that she didn't understand why she was so upset at the time. She confessed that when she had processed her feelings, she realized it was intense jealousy. Kate revealed to me, for the first time, that she was diagnosed with IBS a few months ago. She said hers is not as severe as mine. She said this has been a scary time for her, especially since she has watched me suffer so much from it all these years. Kate said she would want that proposal for herself. She said she wishes she could be that comfortable with a man. She said the comments on my original post made her feel hopeful. She said looking up on IBS more online has made her feel hopeful as well. Kate had explicitly asked me to make this upset post. She apologized again. She said she's glad that my mom is the maid of honor instead of her. She said she's happy for me but also very jealous. Kate says that despite the fact Bailey had sent an apology message too, Bailey still feels awkward talking to me. Kate said that Bailey will come around, that Bailey is just too embarrassed right now after how she acted. I asked Kate if she looked up how common IBS is and she said she looked that up after seeing the comments in my original post. She said she was shocked by how common it is. She said she was avoiding learning about it as she was scared of what she might find. I made sure to tell her that a guy has never dumped me over my IBS. She knows that I had messed around with an embarrassing amount of guys before meeting Peter. I told Kate the reason those hookups never progressed to anything real was because I was too ashamed to let a guy see the IBS part of my life. I told Kate that the person who told me I was ugly and nasty more than anyone was myself. Kate said she hasn't mentally adjusted to this yet but she thinks she can. I told her she's my best friend, I love her, and that I will help her through this. I made a joke about poopy girls having to stick together. That made her smile. After the gym, I rushed home to the toilet to deal with the IBS flare-up I felt coming. To no one's surprise, Peter took care of me when he came home from work. He even helped me to take a bath as I was experiencing so much discomfort. I want everyone to know, Kate has been an amazing friend to me. The disagreement that was at the center of my original post was extremely out of character for her. I had made that post asking if I was wrong because Kate has always been very reasonable. Even with IBS, I'm happy. I have amazing friends, an amazing family, and obviously an amazing fiancé. So if you don't hear much from me on Reddit, don't worry. I'm probably just living an amazing life, even when I'm stuck on the toilet. Update 2. Right now, I'm suffering from one of the worst IBS flare-ups of my life. Plus I have one whopper of a cold. But I have good news. Both Kate and Bailey visited me. Bailey now knows about Kate's IBS from Kate. I was so sick I was laying in bed when my friends visited. Peter was there to help me, of course. Bailey actually cried as she gave her first face-to-face apology for her reaction to my proposal story. She apologized to both Peter and I. She even hugged me despite the fact that I have a cold. Peter and I both accepted Bailey's apology. I told Bailey that she doesn't have to be embarrassed to talk to me. My friends and I talked for a little while before I needed to go to the bathroom. They wished me well before leaving. Peter took care of me, of course. I'm glad that I'm on good terms with both of my closest friends. OOP posted to AMA, I am an IBS girl and I'm getting married to a man who accepts me. AMA, September 25, 2024. I'm a 32-year-old with horrible IBS. I'm getting married to a 30-year-old man who loves me in sickness and in health. My fiancé is the sweetest, as he didn't let my sickness ruin his proposal. I had to rush to the bathroom during our dinner in our hotel room, and he asked me to marry him while I was on the toilet. He probably would have done it another time, but I made hints that I knew he wanted to propose. I'm incredibly happy. At this very moment, I'm suffering from both an IBS flare-up and a cold, so I have time for a Q&A. Ask me anything. Proposed to my girlfriend of 4 years, she said no because it wasn't a surprise. Now I'm wondering if we're on the same page about marriage. Original post. I'll start by saying I love my girlfriend a lot, but she is definitely high maintenance. We've been talking about getting married for a couple of years now, but I wanted to wait until I knew a wedding was something we could afford. I finally got a promotion and she found stable employment, so I went out and bought a ring. We went on a vacation last week. The whole trip was very romantic, and I proposed to her on the beach, which I thought she would have wanted. Turns out she expected it all along because the trip was so romantic and she said no. She wants me to try again but wants it to be a surprise this time. She also wants a photographer to be there to capture the moment. It was pretty fucking embarrassing when a few people came up to us to congratulate us and she was explaining why she said no. I'm not sure what to do. She wanted it to be a surprise but also wanted me to propose as soon as I felt ready to. We also talked about her ideal engagement, and it's on a beach, yes, seriously, in a forest or in a field. I can't imagine any possible scenario where I could surprise her at one of those locations. She is not the outdoorsy type, so it'd be unlikely she would be in any of those locations anyways. I explained my frustration to her and she just said, well, if you want to get married you will find a way to make it work. It seems so bratty and immature and I'm not sure how to deal with her now. I'm still really pissed off about it. What should I do about this? Am I wrong to be pissed off? TL.ER, proposed to my girlfriend but she said no because it wasn't a surprise and there wasn't a photographer there to capture the moment. Only wants to get engaged if the proposal fits a very specific image she has. Relevant comments. Comment 1. Your girlfriend doesn't sound nearly mature enough to get married. Take this as a sign of your life to come and get out. OOP. I think you're right. I had been trying to justify it for her, but judging by the overwhelming response I should probably break it off. Comment 2. Ask your good friends their truthful opinion on her, and make sure to let them know that they won't get a backlash for saying something bad. They know better than us. OOP. My friends can't stand her. Comment 3. Take the ring back to the jeweler. Does she want an engagement or does she want a marriage? I can totally see Bridezilla growing on her already. Yikes. OOP. Yeah, that's another thing. When we were talking about her dream proposal, she was showing me her Pinterest for her dream wedding, and it's full of stuff we won't ever be able to afford. I told her it's unlikely our wedding would be like that, but we could still make it nice, and she said she'd rather wait till we can afford her dream wedding. Comment 4. And by rather wait, I suspect she means nag you about either getting a better job or taking out a loan to pay for what she wants. Don't do this to yourself, man. OOP. Yeah, she told me I could start selling some of the furniture I make, which is something I do as a hobby that she wants me to turn into a second job. Update. Here's a link to my last post, but it got deleted. To summarize, I proposed to my GF on a nice vacation and she rejected it because she knew it was coming and there wasn't a photographer. Thank you all for your comments and messages. Sorry I couldn't respond to most, but I read them all. I decided to try and talk about it with her one last time before throwing in the towel. I wasn't really expecting much, but I just wanted to see if she'd see my side. She lives with me, so I wanted to end things on a good note. She didn't understand at all. She was still saying I needed to work for it and she wasn't taking me seriously, so I broke up with her. Then she told me she accepts my proposal and we're just going through a rough patch, but we will work it out. She was really trying to get me to change my mind and was promising me she would be better to me. She completely ignored me every time I told her we're breaking up and was always yelling over me about how we were going to work things out now that we're engaged, and eventually I just got tired and went to sleep, thinking it was perfectly clear that it was over. I woke up Saturday to a whole bunch of messages. She found the ring and took a pic with it announcing our engagement and tagged me in it on Facebook. We got into another huge fight and eventually I just called her parents and told them to come pick up all her shit or it's going to the dump as soon as she leaves. They were surprisingly understanding. Her dad seemed really embarrassed by her, but they were a huge help. I know it's illegal to do that and I was supposed to actually evict her, but she got seriously violent and I didn't want her in my house anymore. She smashed my iPad and knocked my PlayStation off the TV stand and both are completely broken, so I didn't want to wait around and see what else she would do. She wouldn't even give me the ring back. Her dad had to guilt her into it. It was pretty pathetic. So that's the end of us. Really sucks I wasted the last 4 years with her, but I guess it was better to get out now. It's nice that I can hang out with all my friends again. A girl I'm friends with asked me out on a date, so that's what I'm doing tomorrow. I'm actually pretty nervous. I know it's way too early, but even if it doesn't work out, it should be fun to start dating again. TLDR, broke up with GF, and she decided that meant we were engaged, then she threw a fit and broke my iPad and PlayStation relevant comments. Comment 1, a girl I'm friends with asked me out on a date, so that's what I'm doing tomorrow. Too soon, bro. OOP, she knows the entire situation. It's not serious. She told me years ago she had a crush on me, but we're good friends now. Who knows what will happen? Comment 2, perhaps this is why your crazy ex did not like your girlfriends. OP, yeah, that's what started it. I don't blame my girlfriend for that. I shut my friend down then and told my girlfriend about it because I didn't want to keep things from her. I don't think I did anything wrong in that situation, but after that she didn't want me talking to any women. Fiance's toxic best friend torments me. My mental health suffers. Is our relationship doomed or can we recover before the wedding? My fiance has the biggest heart, would literally give you the shirt, pants, and hat off his body if you asked for it. He's a recovering people pleaser, and I get it because I also used to be a people pleaser. We've been together for 5+ years. A few months ago, I started picking up on his best friend making some not so nice comments towards me. I'm trying to be vague, but let's just say this friend is the type to read who in the room would be most affected by being picked on, and then he picks and picks and picks on them until they can't take it anymore. Nobody ever really holds him accountable for this, and unfortunately I have somehow become his favorite target. I tried to put up with these comments, but it started getting really elaborate. The friend would make up lies about me saying things I never said. He once called me in front of all our friends, my fiance included, just to yell "you're a bad friend" into the phone and then hang up. There's so much to it that I can't share because I'm trying to be somewhat anonymous. It started having an effect on me and my mental health, and I ended up having a full breakdown where I told my fiance how much this was all starting to hurt me. The first time I broke down over this, he said he would talk to his friend about teasing, messing with me less. He then told me his friend was sorry and that he'd be keeping an ear out for any other comments and he'd jump to my defense if it happened again. A few weeks later I had a second breakdown over all this. The situation itself is hitting a very specific childhood trauma trigger for me, and he admitted that his friend didn't actually apologize. He actually said he was sorry I was too sensitive to understand his humor. At that point I told my fiance my friendship with this person is over and I want zero contact from here on out, even if it means I have to miss out on events and parties that I'd otherwise love to go to. He agreed with me that all of this is being done with the intention to get a rise out of me, and that even if we tried to get through to this friend, he's so diabolical that we could never fully trust him to not treat me at least a little bit shitty. My fiance kept asking if this meant he had to quit the project they're working on. I told him I would never tell him he had to because I know how much it means to him, but in all honesty, the fact that this person is treating me so poorly that I'm having physical stress reactions isn't enough for him to want to cut this person off does hurt a lot. The fact that it isn't a deal breaker for him is probably always going to sting a little. He's not confrontational at all and I always knew that, but it's not about confrontation. It's about standing in my corner. And I can't spend the rest of my life with someone who isn't in my corner. This friend is getting married to my best friend in a few months and we're both supposed to be in the wedding, but I really have no clue how. I get a literal knot in my stomach anytime his name is even mentioned now. I have seen this friend one time since all of this came to a head and he was so over the top nice to me that it came off as cocky. I had the second breakdown a few days afterwards because I realized I'm possibly going to spend the rest of my life on edge and on guard anytime this person is even somewhat in my vicinity. Even if they aren't actively fucking with me. I don't know how to come to terms with the fact that my fiancé was willing to lie to me on his shitty friend's behalf, but he's not willing to stand in my corner against him. I think it'll always hurt. This guy was supposed to be the best man in our wedding, and as a result we haven't been talking much about wedding plans. I think if he's still planning on this friend being in our wedding, I may have to call it off for my own sanity, and that sucks so bad. This is fucking eating me alive. I love my fiancé so much. I love his big heart and the way he loves all of it. But he loves some truly wretched people, and I don't know if he'll enforce any boundaries with those people before the lack of boundaries becomes too much for me to handle. I'm just hurt. And hurting. And I just want whatever outcome to play out so I can stop feeling so guilty and awful all the time. Comments. Comment 1. If your fiancé will not stick up for you, it's more than just being a people pleaser. He's a doormat. Comment 2. And her best friend isn't much of a friend either, considering the problematic friend is marrying her best friend. She should also be telling him to back off too. Update 1. Never thought I'd actually update this account out of sheer fucking embarrassment, but I wanted to share this for those who encouraged me to put myself first. I want you all to know my partner absolutely came through and protected me in this. We spent all this time since my last post up until last week communicating and trying to find a resolution, and walking through how it got this bad. He took a lot of accountability for that. This is not a case of me giving in. He understands fully that this has only got so bad because it's never been handled correctly, and he had a major hand in that. There were so many more layers to this than a Reddit post ever could have conveyed. The bottom line is we are closer than ever, and after a lot of talking, we decided on my partner sending a firm but not unkind message to his friend explaining the behaviors, explaining that they were hurting his partner, and that it needed to stop. He asked to write up the first draft and we could go over it together to try to perfect it. Reddit, please know the first draft my partner wrote was so spot on what I needed to read that it instantly shifted us into us versus the problem mode when we'd been stuck butting heads for weeks. He laid everything out so clearly and in ways that we hadn't discussed, so I know it came from him. We had to tone down a lot of the big emotions. We really truly gave the message its best shot to address the situation without being hostile. We knew the response would be bad no matter what, but I don't think anything could have fucking prepared us. This man went full scorched earth and blew up everything almost immediately. He insulted my partner. He told him these events didn't happen the way I claim they do. He demanded they meet up alone with a mediator. He even threatened to reach out to my partner's parents to fill them in, which is probably the moment we stopped taking his responses seriously. All of us are almost in our 30s. If once wasn't enough, he threatened it twice. We actually had to call them and warn them that he would be showing up at their place later this week and not to open the door. There's still a good chance he'll attempt it. We stayed respectful throughout all of this, which I feel good about. We didn't stoop to his level. We didn't insult anyone. We asked for basic human respect and somehow it blew up spectacularly. In the end, we both received a massive wall of text from my now ex-best friend, fully backing up her man and telling her side of the story, which is so insanely far off from what actually happened that all I can do is laugh. We've been shifting from crying to being dumbstruck to just straight up laughing because of the absurdity. I went into this thinking she was brainwashed, but it turns out I was wrong. They're a perfect match. I wish them all the best. I am sending them one last message setting the record straight, which my partner and I decided together was the best approach apart from just ghosting, before moving on from this entirely. I'm going to make it very clear this is done, zero contact indefinitely, and I will never look back. My partner and I both deserve way better friends and we both see that so clearly now. I am so fucking glad I learned my friend's true colors before we dropped $800 on a hotel for their wedding. Thank you to everyone who was kind. Not only did I put myself first in the end, but my partner did too. We're going to take this week in stride and process it all, grieve the friendships we once thought were forever, and at the end of the week we have a conveniently timed vacation to my partner's family cottage. I think we're going to come out of this stronger, because we already feel it. Again, thank you to those who had something productive to say. And I've made my peace with all the rest. I guess if the guy does something else outlandish, maybe I'll update, but for now, this chapter is closed and I'm so ready for it to start collecting dust. Comments. Comment 1. It sounds like both of your ex-friends were from your people's pleasing days. It's time for a fresh start. And I'm glad you're both going to get it before your wedding so they're not in the photos. Comment 2. Good riddance to bad rubbish. Wishing you both peace. Update 2. Hey all. Told myself I wouldn't update again, but there has been a pretty massive development. Not sure if anyone is really that invested in this shit show, but it's actually helped me to type it out the first couple times, so maybe I'll feel a bit better if I do it again. Sorry in advance for how disgustingly long this is gonna be, lol. A few weeks ago the asshole showed his entire hand. He sent my partner a message at 11 a.m. on a Monday and it is the most unhinged shit I've ever read. I'll sum it up for you. The asshole said he believed my partner is in an abusive relationship and he should leave me, for his own happiness. He claimed he has evidence to support this. He admitted this was the big message he would have given had they met in person in the very beginning. He also told him he was worried sending the message would make things even worse for my partner if I saw it. He said I am someone he can never forgive and he will never want to associate with ever again. He ended it by saying he hopes he'll leave me so my partner can apologize for breaking up the band. Yes, it was a band. And they can start to repair their friendship. Obviously a whole lot to digest. I know y'all don't know me, but I'm obviously not abusing my partner lol. I shouldn't even have to clarify that, but I will anyway. This guy is 100% excommunicated from our lives indefinitely, not that he already wasn't at that point. In light of this new info, I'd like to share some of the things the asshole has done over the past year or so that made me realize he was fucking with me, but I didn't clock at the time because, much like some of you, I thought I was just being sensitive. My partner and I joined some pals, including an asshole, to play a game together online. Lethal Company if you're familiar. I have many hours in the game and know the monsters quite well, so I was pretty confused when I was slaughtered by a bracket 3 game days in a row, almost immediately upon entering the facility and splitting from the group. I mentioned at one point that I'd be having a lot more fun if I wasn't dying so quickly every time, and the asshole mockingly said it must be a skill issue. After a few more deaths, this time with me at least getting to explore a bit before getting my neck snapped, I asked if anyone had the Control Company mod installed, which allows the server host to play as the monsters. Suddenly the asshole had to go, and the lobby conveniently disbanded. I never brought my suspicions up to anyone because I knew it would be my word against his and I had no solid proof so I wasn't positive, but when I finally mentioned it to my partner a couple of weeks ago after that text was sent he told me he remembers the asshole staying on the ship and secretly going AFK multiple times in the game, which lines up pretty perfectly with my in-game deaths. When I said the asshole was being too nice, the time we saw him after my partner called him about his comments affecting me. I don't think I explained it right. My partner and I were sitting at a table at a local show and the asshole sat next to me, not my partner, and wouldn't stop touching my arm and asking me if I was enjoying the show. Multiple times he would just stare at me and grin as wide as he could. If I had just been told something I did hurt my friend's partner, I don't think I'd be all over them the way this guy was to me. Hell, if it were me I'd at least throw a sorry about the other night their way. It felt like he was gloating that he got away with it. It was comically over the top and made me and my partner very uncomfortable. We talked on the drive home and we both felt the same about it. I was hanging out with my friend at her place and an asshole was there, so we all decided to head to my place and hang with my partner as a foursome. Right before we left the asshole asked if I knew our mutual friend's big secret. I did not. I'm also not very close with this friend. My friend already knew and told him they should just tell me because I wouldn't be that invested, but asshole told her my partner didn't know yet and they couldn't tell me until we all got to my place and told him. He kept going on about how big the secret was and insisted that I'd freak out once I knew. I made a comment about how we were taking different cars and there was a chance my friend would just tell me on the way, so he looked her dead in the face and told her that he'd be genuinely upset with her if she told me before he told my partner. We respected that. When we got to my place, it was obvious my partner already knew. The big secret was simply that our friend was dating someone. I found out later that the asshole had called my partner the minute he got to his car and told him that both me and my friend didn't know and they should put on a big show of telling both of us together. My partner had known for weeks and the friend group had openly discussed it a few times, and it hadn't come up with me because, as I said, I'm not very close with this friend. I got baited lol. Truly exhausting behavior. My partner had no idea what happened until I told him about the conversation at the asshole's place and my friend didn't say a word in my defense. I typed out exactly why this was ridiculous once all this came to a head and they both refused to even acknowledge it. I dyed my hair blue. My first outing with the new hair was with the whole group. I went all out on my makeup and outfit and was pretty stoked on it. I'm not exaggerating in the slightest when I say the asshole made 20+ jokes about my hair in the span of about 15 minutes. It was pretty much every time he interacted with me, which he seemed to go out of his way to do specifically so he could make jokes about my hair. If you've ever had blue hair then you've probably heard most of the jokes he was making. I laughed along for the first few. I can definitely handle banter as it's a huge part of almost all of my friendships, but after about 20 jokes I finally said it was getting old and asked if he had anything nice to say. He responded by making another 5 jokes with a big shit-eating grin on his face and implied I was too sensitive. There truly was no off switch with the guy. Anyways, Just wanted you all to know I'm not crazy. The asshole has literally been trying to drive me mad for at least a year and it almost worked. My partner and I have had many conversations about all this, and I know a lot of people had a lot to say about him, but please know this was eating both of us alive. He wanted to make things work so badly, he wanted to at least try to salvage their 20+ year friendship. But he understands now that was never possible, and he knows neither of us deserve to be treated the way the asshole treated us. This was never just about me. If he was a good friend to my partner, maybe things would be different and we could have tried harder to get through to him, but this is just who he is at his core. He's known for being a prick for no reason and lying about it. And there's no space in either of our lives for that. Anyways, I doubt the asshole can top that message, so this is the last update I'll give. My partner and I are coming out of this way stronger. The asshole has completely brainwashed my friend, and I've made my peace with it. She can have him, LOL. Godspeed to the both of them. Thanks to all who showed understanding. Hopefully this is all going to be behind us very soon, once the dust fully settles. Comment: it all sounds like he was jealous of you and was threatened by your relationship with your fiancé. He probably felt that you were taking his best friend away from him. Just a quick question. Did you date your fiancé before or after your ex-best friends started dating? It's just that if they started after you, he could have done it to punish you and take her away from you or to make sure he stayed close to your fiancé. Also, did it ever cross your mind that your ex-best friend was in love with him, because his behavior sounds indicative of a jealous ex-lover? I'm not saying that your fiancé was in love with him, or even did anything with him, only that his ex-best friend's feelings could have been one-sided and not known to your fiancé. Anyway, I hope that you two can concentrate on your wedding now that the toxic people are out of your life and that you both have a wonderful future together and a beautifully unforgettable wedding. Update me if your toxic ex-best friends do anything else, but I honestly hope that they don't. OOP, the asshole met my friend through me. And I truly don't think he was in love with my partner, just loved to control him. He tries to control everyone around him. Karen demands a new car after watching TikTok push present trend, sparking major marriage conflict. After 5 years of marriage, my wife is currently carrying our child. She emailed me a TikTok video of a woman debating the idea of a push gift on a podcast a few days ago. I originally had no idea what it meant, but when I searched it out I discovered it's essentially a thank you present to the woman bearing your child. To me this idea appeared really weird. Although your husband's gratitude for what women go through during pregnancy and childbirth is much sought for, the materialistic element stopped me. The woman on TikTok went on and on about how it's a body for a body, implying that the man should get a permanent tattoo on his lower body as well as offer her a house and a car as special gifts. Those expectations struck me as rather reasonable, a little vengeful, and overdone for my taste. Couples make the united decision to bring a child into the world. In our situation, my wife wants to be a parent too. Thus she was not under pressure to be pregnant. Thinking that would be the end of it, I just answered the TikTok with laughing emojis and went on. I figured she submitted the video as satire, something like, "Oh look how ridiculous this is." I reacted to the video while she was in the other room. She came to me saying she wanted me to tap into my own resources to acquire a car specifically for her, even though she does not anticipate a tattoo or an elite house. Almost startled, I looked at her and started giggling. Though I knew I was mistaken, my wife and I agreed on how foolish individuals sometimes are. I prodded her to find out whether she was really serious. She grew really agitated and stated she indeed wanted a real push present. Her gift is, I reminded her, the realization of a healthy baby and parenting itself. Materially speaking, I'll probably send her a Mother's Day card, a day off, some jewelry she likes under $700, but nothing more. I pointed out that our automobile, not only hers, will be hers if she truly wants an extra car. She argued it was insufficient given what she would go through. She persisted and inquired as to whether I felt she was unworthy. She is worthy as my partner and the mother of my child, but she also has to be reasonable and realize that neither of us is personally deserving of what she is requesting. She needs to control her expectations, I remarked, since I don't see why she feels qualified for that. It came out wrong, but I meant not to discount her personally. She is crying about the argument right now and is not talking to me. I heard her on the phone berating me to her sister. But under no circumstances would I ever think of giving her a car. She's hurting right now, so I feel guilty. Yet I'm not evil for giving her a reality check. My push present was sushi soon after the birth of the small one. I couldn't have any and really craved sushi all during my pregnancy. Not that jerk. I'm expecting and my spouse is going to present me with birthstone jewelry. I'm also giving him a watch with an engraving. Those TikTok videos ruin relationships totally. Once she wouldn't create her brother-in-law a boo basket for Halloween, My sister-in-law almost left my brother-in-law. Why women need relationship advice from TikTok is beyond me. Relationships are being destroyed at frightening speed on social media. Ex-wife who cheated and abandoned her family shows up years later, with another man's child, begging for a second chance. What should I do? Some background here. I, 37 male, and Angela, 36, my ex-wife, had met in our mid-20s. We met when I was about 24 and we were employed by the same company. We were married after 2 years of dating, and 3 years into our marriage we had 2 kids, now 9 and 7 years old. Though I had told her it would be good with me if she did, I didn't want to put her through anything she didn't want, hence the second pregnancy was unexpected and she wasn't happy about it. She didn't kill it either. Things were still wonderful between us and we were as in love as we could have following our first daughter. After the second pregnancy though, that changed. She started to get rather irritated, sullen, and started to pick on our eldest or me consistently. Just realizing this was due to all the hormones, I tried to reconcile with this new Angela. After some time, we believed this would change. Instead, things just became worse. Around her, my daughter and I learnt to walk on eggshells. She was supposed to be a stay-at-home mom, but I was running everything. After our first child, she had quit her job of her own volition and done all the housework along with looking after our eldest while I worked till she fell pregnant for the second time. She claimed she was too weary to take care of our children and the house, hence we had to get a maid while she was pregnant. I consented, even though it was only somewhat outside our means since at the time I wasn't making enough. Especially considering Angela's pregnancy, I wanted not to trouble her too much. After our second daughter was born, I thought she would come back tending to the house and children throughout the day. Let me also state clearly that I was not among those men who neglected household chores. Though I was tired from working, I did anything I could to help out after returning from my job. I assumed she would take some time to heal after she delivered our younger daughter, but then we would go back to our regular life. Still, several months passed and she showed no change. She refused to help out around the house and stayed exactly as angry and agitated. She would simply spend all day seated at home watching TV. She hardly engaged in any activities with the children either. She would periodically pay our neighbor to drive them to the park. Though I wouldn't want to come across as hostile, I did feel that way as I was working day and night while she wouldn't even do the minimum at home. Additionally, proving somewhat costly for me to pay for a maid to do all the cooking, cleaning and other domestic tasks was, along with all the other bills, I had to look after and wanted to preserve money for our daughter's futures. Angela refused to assist me in any kind, hence that was practically impossible. After around 6 months following the birth of our younger daughter, I realized we could not continue like this and had to speak with Angela. Knowing this would be a challenging conversation, so I requested my parents to watch our girls for the day. They agreed. That day, I sat Angela down and told her I realized she was fatigued with 2 pregnancies, but I needed her to assist me and coordinate with me. I told her that we were finding a maid to be too costly, and I needed her to respect her word and return to at least some of the housework so we may renegotiate and cut the housekeeper's pay to save some money. She claimed she was too busy watching the children to handle any of the housework, so she turned down the proposal right away. She also advised me to start making more instead of justifying our financial condition by pointing out her guilt. Although I attempted to persuade her I was already doing my best, if we were to make this marriage work she needed to help too. I also mentioned how, from what I knew, she simply let the children watch television with her for hours while she watched tacky reality TV, neglecting their needs. The housekeeping had remarked to me casually this as well. She flared up and accused me of spying on her through the maid, so I quickly understood that bringing this up was a big mistake. Saying she was done being pushed about by me and forced to do all the labor while I purportedly did nothing except sit at a desk for a few hours each day, she went on a rant against me. Claiming I should be the man of the house, she then chastised me for asking her to help and blamed me for not being able to pay a maid. While I was the rational one expecting her to help the house, her charges were utterly nonsensical and she was merely grabbing at straws to give the impression that her not doing anything all day was normal. We finally got into a huge argument and she labeled me a loser unable to afford to be with a woman like her. Given how terrified our eldest daughter was of her, I responded by accusing her of being a lazy cow who had already failed at being a good mother. Now she was failing as a wife too. That comment definitely spoke to her, and she pushed me hard. I stumbled, fell back on the coffee table, broke the glass and hurt myself. I had to get hurried to the ER. She continued to apologize and weep all through, but fortunately my back was only mildly injured. She had to move out. I told her I no longer trusted her. Around the children, I couldn't trust her either as I had no idea when she could lose her fury once more and damage them as well. While Angela was still living, I urged our parents to look after our daughters. She kept protesting for a week, pledging she would never let something like that happen once more, but I couldn't believe her. She begged me to give her another chance. I almost filed for divorce. By the conclusion of the week, we decided she would receive therapy and go live with her parents for some period. I would let her move back in with us only once she had been vetted by a medical professional. She was willing to work on it and improve, thus clearly something was quite wrong with her since happy individuals do not act that way. I also wanted my girls to have their mother, hence I chose not to divorce her just yet and give our marriage another go. While we were living apart, we also began marriage counseling. But, ultimately it proved to be ineffective. She turned out to be cheating on me. Angela was living with her folks when my parents came in to help with my girls. We attended weekly marriage counseling sessions and for some time things looked to be improving. Her therapist contacted me as well. She informed me she had postpartum depression but was improving. Anger problems had been one of her symptoms. She had never had them before, but they became very out of hand when she pushed me. For both of us, that woke us awake. This continued for about a year and around 6 months in there I even let her visit our girls under my direction. It delighted me to watch her gradually returning to her old self. At last, our circumstances seemed better and we could really make it work. She then abruptly quit showing up for our counseling appointments without giving any reason though. She stopped answering me as well, but given her therapist kept me informed, I knew she was progressing. It did not make sense to me. I persisted in attempting to talk to her for weeks, but she would simply blow me off claiming she needed some alone time. At last, after almost 3 months of her avoiding me, I paid her a visit at her parents' house. Her parents disliked me and blamed me for her actions, thus I hadn't done that previously. They thought I was the one who had driven their daughter insane and produced such behavior. Angela had advised me it would be better if I skipped seeing her while she was living with them since it would simply cause more drama, the last thing we wanted. She had been acting aloof and skipping counseling appointments, hence I disregarded that guideline and paid them nevertheless. She seemed indifferent even when she did sporadically come up, and I simply could not understand it. She insisted everything was good whether I tried personally speaking with her, on the phone, or even by text. But her behavior made it abundantly evident she was hiding something from me. When I arrived at her parents' place, I thought she would be there but she wasn't. Her parents slammed the door in my face when I asked where she was and said they were not permitted to tell me. I had a nasty feeling about it since I could tell they were loving the circumstances. So, standing before their house, I made the decision to phone Angela. My paranoia was developing as I tried phoning her several times but she didn't answer. Desperate, I resolved to try to go inside myself by slipping around the house. Knowing her parents typically kept the kitchen door open, I headed around to the backyard. But I didn't have to travel that far since Angela was seated on a swing in the backyard. The bad news was that she was making out with a man I didn't know, not alone. Because that was the most terrible event of my life, that instant is etched in my head. The man went away as soon as he noticed me, and by the time Angela looked around I was already headed back to my car. I was in total shock, hence she caught up with me and tried to stop me but I was not hearing anything she was saying. I shook her off and warned her not to touch me when she tried to grab me. She neglected, thus I got in my automobile and headed home. I told my parents I wanted them to hire a lawyer for me and blocked Angela everywhere as soon as I got home so she wouldn't have an opportunity to explain. When I paid Angela's parents a visit, I told them of what I had recently seen. She never contacted me once again until we had to visit the court-appointed mediator for our divorce settlement. By then I had essentially become a robot, totally shut off emotionally but driven only for the benefit of my girls. Even when I learned Angela was entering her parental rights, I felt nothing. She had decided she wanted to be with the guy, let's call him Sean, who I saw her with instead of with us. He was her friend from childhood. Although they had drifted apart during high school, they got back together when she moved back home with her parents. Apparently she had developed feelings for him. Her parents apparently encouraged this, hence it's likely why they didn't object to her kissing him in their backyard even though she is a married woman with 2 kids. Apparently, they had always wanted her to wind up with Sean, and they were glad Angela was at last choosing herself and her own happiness, as if she had ever been capable of doing anything other than that. She wanted to qualify for alimony, hence the divorce was a protracted procedure even though she had been cheating on me. Though it took some time, my attorney and I battled valiantly to ensure she received nothing in the divorce. Since I had been the one paying for everything while she watched TV at home, it was all rightly mine. The divorce was finalized 5 years ago, and we were successful in ensuring she left empty-handed. Though I knew I couldn't break since I had to look after my girls, who had nobody but me, the months I spent handling the divorce were some of the toughest periods I had. I can never enough thank my parents for being there for me when I balance job and childcare. They are quite helpful and supportive. 5 years have gone by, and although at first the divorce seemed like the worst thing that could happen to me, I am glad for it today. Had I not chosen to leave Angela, I do not see myself where I am right now. Since then, life has given me good treatment. In every sense, I am in a far better place. We moved into a larger house since I make more now and I have no more responsibility for anyone except my girls. Although they live nearby, my parents only pay occasional visits. My daughters are as delighted as could be, and I have friends that love me. All a man needs is that. I am so grateful to the universe that everything is working for me. At least, it was until Angela reappeared a few days ago. The doorbell rang when the children were at school and I was ready to head off to work. Angela was outside standing with a boy less than 3 or 4 years old at her side. This has to be Angela's son, I knew. Her standing at my door startled me, and I was still processing it when she started crying. She came here, she informed me, to atone and right things with me. She declared she was at last ready to be a family once more and offer our marriage another shot. She was returning after all these years, eager to give our marriage another try as if it were up to her to make that choice. It still astounds me. I chose in a short second to shut the door and turn her away since I wanted to avoid whatever this was. I informed her earlier that this was no longer her family. The day she broke off contact with Sean, I had stopped being her husband. She had given up custody of her daughter, hence she had no right to speak to us as her family. The divorce was only a legal requirement. I closed the door after saying that and instructed her to go as I wanted her nowhere close to my property. Though I was very furious and could have cursed her as well, I held back since the small child made me hesitate. For a few minutes after I closed her out, I could hear her crying outside my door. I chose to ignore it. I headed off to work once I confirmed the coast was free. I tried very hard not to think about it as I couldn't afford to let it happen and it would only sap my will. I nearly forgot that Angela had even shown up at my house, but as soon as I got back from work, my parents called me asking why I had sent her away. Angela had been heartbroken, they told me, having contacted them following my closing of the door on her. Since she was in the process of divorcing Sean and at last had an opportunity to make things right with me, my parents disclosed they were the ones who had provided her my new address and urged her to visit me. They informed me Angela had contacted them roughly 1 month ago and that this had been under development for some time. My parents thought it was about time I considered my children since my daughters deserved a mother and in their view Angela was the best mother available. They thus determined she deserved another shot and sent her my address and with guidance on what to say to me. I took great offense at them. Not even asking if I would be comfortable with it, it was not their position to pardon her or determine she deserved another shot. If the children had been home, it may have been quite dangerous, so their pulling of something like this was reckless. They denied that they had made a mistake even as I corrected them. They claimed they had an equal right to decide what was best for the girls since they had taken care of the kids and aided me during my divorce. They also said they still periodically look after them. They thought it pointless whether or not I wanted to fix things with Angela since they had influence in the situation as well. Their belief in that seemed ludicrous to me. My daughters are mine, not hers at the end of the day. Although I value my parents and will always be appreciative of what they did during the divorce, I do not believe it was their place to let Angela re-enter my life. We argued a little, but they felt that by not giving Angela another opportunity, I was the one acting selfishly. They assured me they had done their due research and she was a different woman now, deserving of living with my girls. They claimed it was offensive to consider they would endanger my girls or me even when I informed them she had signed her rights away. Being too conceited to realize that my daughters needed their mother, they said I was destroying their life. It has been a couple days now, and I do not believe I was selfish or out of line. I have given this much thought. Update 1. Angela arrived up to my home with her son approximately a week ago and lately I learned the truth about her connection with her parents. Since I'm still trying to understand it personally and I honestly find it so upsetting not even knowing where to start. How all of them have deceived me without thinking twice is unbelievable. Apparently, my parents had been in communication with Angela all along in addition to telling her my new address. After the divorce, I cut her off from my life, but they hadn't since they thought she would visit at some time. They hardly spoke, just once a month perhaps, but that was plenty for me to feel cheated from. After Angela was handed the divorce papers, Sean had Angela sign away her rights. He had set her an ultimatum. Either keep in contact with her children and battle for custody, therefore leaving him behind, or ditch her family and establish a new life with him. According to my parents, she had had a tough decision. She chose Sean and opted to start a new family with him rather than remain with the one she already knew. Angela had contacted her parents soon after I filed for divorce to explain her circumstances and request their assistance since she still wanted to keep intimate contact with her children. She said she felt driven into a position by both Sean pushing her to completely forsake her children and me advocating for full custody with supervised visits. Her prospects of obtaining partial custody were low even if she battled for custody and opposed Sean because of the circumstances of our divorce and her history of anger management problems. Her time and money seemed wasted fighting for custody. Should she choose to battle, she had a very real risk losing Sean and custody of our girls in the end. My parents entered at that point. Angela visited with them individually and essentially begged them to let her keep contact with our girls. She asked them to be a link between her and the children, thereby helping her out. Angela understood she would lose any visitation rights once she signed away her parental rights. As their grandparents, my parents intended to take advantage of their visiting rights though. By going behind my back to let Angela meet our girls, they effectively misled me for years. Saying Angela's plight resonated with them, they explained their behavior as they couldn't, in good conscience, keep a mother apart from her children. Still, stabbing their own son in the rear seemed to have no effect on their conscience at all. They acknowledged that Angela would be invited over and allowed to spend time with them anytime I left the children off at their place. My parents would pay my daughters toys and candy to be quiet, hence they never told me they were seeing their mother. My girls would tell me they played games with their grandparents and their friend anytime I asked what they had done at their grandparents' house. I always assumed they were referring to my parents' real friends, whom I already knew, but apparently my parents had told my daughters to call their mother the friend should I ask about their day. Although I couldn't believe my girls had been lying to me. I pardoned them since Angela and my parents had obviously coerced and threatened them into silence. It's only for kids. I asked my daughters whether they had been meeting their mother behind my back once I found the truth out from my parents. They began to cry and informed me they felt they would be punished by God should they say anything, so they were unable to say anything. Angela and my dad have to have really hammered it into their minds that telling me the truth would have disastrous results. They had been so evasive and covert all along for this reason. For never asking my girls which of their parents' friends they had been seeing, I also felt like a bad father. I never would have known. It could have been someone deadly simply. But since I am receiving a restraining order against all of them, I am ending this right now. Since my parents emailed me confessing everything following our argument, I already had written evidence. They thought the email would help me to understand Angela's desperation to be a mother to her daughters while juggling her relationship with Sean. Though all it accomplished was to prove they were all lying to me and I couldn't trust anyone anymore, they believed it would make me forgive everyone involved. Angela signed away her parental rights and had to sneak about to meet the children like it was a crime, all because Sean wanted her to have no contact with her former family. Which is ironic. Originally meant to be her one true love, all of it was for nothing as they are divorcing. Though according to my parents Sean now wants nothing to do with any of them, they even had a son together. Angela didn't want to depart since their son had just begun kindergarten and she had started working again. He got a job offer and is leaving in a few months. Their arguments had been getting more intense for some time. 3 months ago, Sean told her he was done and headed off to accept the job. Though all this disclosure did was make me feel as though justice had at last been done, it was meant to make me sorry for Angela. My attorney has already advised me. The petition for restraining orders has been filed. My daughters and I have also had a decent conversation on everything. I warned them they would never see their mother or grandparents once again going forward. They seem good right now, but we are still working through it in therapy since I know this will be challenging for them. For the past 5 years, they most certainly have found it difficult. This ends immediately. Update 2. Hi everyone. I greatly appreciate all the attention and help. I truly appreciate all the wonderful blessings and messages directed towards my girls. Angela and my parents should show up in court in a few days. They have been issued restraining orders. I have blocked them on every platform, thus I have no idea how they feel about any of this. I have also advised friends not to talk to them should they try to get in touch. I have been working from home for the past few days and have added security around my place. I told the school where my girls go. I first wanted not to send the children to school for a few days, but I wanted their education not to suffer as a result. Their teachers are now monitoring them, none save me is permitted to pick them up after school. Things have so far been nice. I hope they will keep away once the restraining orders are issued. Update 3. Hello, here is a brief update. But we obtained restraining orders. Angela, my parents and Sean have to keep their distance from me and my girls for the next 5 years, else, they will suffer major penalties. The previous time I saw them, they appeared really hostile, hence I am maintaining all the security precautions for a period since I want to avoid any risk. Regular family counseling sessions are attended by my daughters and me. I think we will make great progress in the next months. To be honest, we have already advanced really much. Right now, I just want my daughters to be happy. That is all. Kindly keep forwarding us your best wishes, we really need them. After my dad remarried, he neglected me and prioritized his new family, making me feel like a guest in his home. Am I the jerk for resenting him? When I was younger, I had a great relationship with my father. My parents split when I was an infant, although I spent the week with my mother and weekends with my father. My father and I were like best friends, and we had a set schedule every weekend. We'd grab 5 Redbox DVDs to watch over the weekend, go fishing, play soccer, and bike to a hidden playground near the zoo. I was also used to my father constantly having different girlfriends, none of whom lasted more than 2 weeks. The only one who stayed longer was a woman I admired, who was there for 2 years. She left my father when I was 10. Despite this, my relationship with my father remained unchanged until I was 12, when he met his current wife. This woman had 2 children, one older and one younger than myself. They moved into my father's apartment after just 2 weeks. My room was already small, but my tiny mattress and 3 small plastic drawers were pushed into the corner to make way for my daughter's bunk bed and dresser. Before I knew it, they began putting my bed in a closet while I wasn't present and frequently forgot to take it out when I came to visit. When my father moved into a larger house, the older sister received her own room, whereas I had to share one with the younger sister every weekend. The 3 small drawers I had were quickly reduced to just 1 because my younger sister wanted the other 2 for toys. I gradually began to visit my father less frequently. Things got extremely bad when my father got his girlfriend pregnant. After a year, they married, and I had no idea for a month because he hadn't told me. I also had no idea my newborn half-sister was born until weeks after she returned home from the hospital. To make his new family happy, my father began indulging them and stopped paying child support to me and my mother. His non-working wife cooks, cleans, and shops, while my father pays for her older daughter's college tuition. The younger daughter is the epitome of a 10-year-old Sephora child. My half-sister is still a toddler, but she is plainly spoiled and hates the word no. My father and I had a routine that is no longer in place. My stepfather has been with my mother since I was 5. Apparently, though I don't remember it, I once called him Dad. And as a result, my father told me not to love him like a father since he isn't my father. I believe this is why I began acting as if I despised my stepfather. I had no idea why I felt that way toward him because he has always been nothing but nice to me. In recent years, I've felt considerably closer to him. He feels like the father my biological father should be. Over time, my father began to treat me differently. He rants to me about his political opinions, conspiracy theories regarding aliens, and other topics. He also boasts about his new business and family. If I try to share anything with him, he gets upset and shuts me down, instead continuing with his own story. It appears that he now considers me a friend rather than his daughter. In recent years, I've learned that my parents' divorce wasn't because they weren't compatible, but because my father cheated on my mother while visiting his family in Canada. I am now 15 years old and have changed drastically from the person my birth father remembers. I used to enjoy the beach and soccer, but now I prefer music, reading and writing. Since 2022 I have written and published 2 books, and I am currently working on the 3rd in my series. My stepfather believes in my dreams and loves me so much that he brags about me to friends and family, referring to me as his daughter. He also has a biological daughter, who I adore like a true sister, but she lives up north with her boyfriend, so I don't see her very frequently. Nonetheless, I adore them more than my biological father and half-sister, with whom I'm actually linked. My father blames me for not phoning him, but given how he has treated me recently, I don't feel like I owe him that. I also go months without seeing him anymore since I no longer feel at ease in that place. Especially because the bed I sleep on is actually their guest bed. I am a guest at my birth father's house. Because of this, I resent my father. I haven't informed anyone how I feel, so no one is calling me a jerk, but I'm wondering if I am. My father appears content with his new family, and I'm left wondering whether it's terrible that I'm not glad for him. Am I the jerk? Update 1. Hello. I wrote a post a few months ago about how my father has stopped treating me as his daughter now that he has a new family. Not much has changed since then, but here's an update nevertheless. Since my initial post, I've only been to my father's place once. It's safe to say that I'm just an uncomfortable guest in their house. I should begin by mentioning that whenever I go a few months without visiting, my father attempts to appear innocent. He phones me every Friday to inquire when he should pick me up. I never answer because he always calls while I'm in class or studying. So he phones my mother, But because he never asks in advance, I usually have plans on weekends with my cousins, friends, or just writing. As I am still working on my third novel, which requires a lot of focus that I can't get at his house. Actually, I'm just going to name him Eric. He hasn't been much of a father figure to me, unlike my stepfather. Anyway, my mother decided I'd go over to his house, despite the fact that Eric hasn't paid child support in over 2 years, and I despise coming there. My mother suggests that I pay him a visit every now and then to keep him out of trouble with the courts. She sometimes confuses me, claiming he's a deadbeat, but also that he's a loving father who deserves to be respected. However, given the circumstances, I'm very convinced nothing would have changed because I seldom visit him and he doesn't pay child support anyhow. In instance, one Christmas, he purchased and wrapped a large number of new items for his family. When I was visiting him a few weeks before Christmas, he drove to Walmart to get his wife some food. He handed me $200 and said, "Merry Christmas, buy yourself something, and the rest can be used for child support or whatever." I purchased 2 books, but the remainder of the money, which was supposed to be child support, was far from what he owed. I've told my mother that I'd be happy if he lost custody of me and my stepfather adopted me, but she feels that's too severe, saying, "He's still your father, he deserves your respect and love." Now it was the weekend, and I paid him a visit. From the moment Eric picked me up, he only talked about his new family. He discussed the older sister and her boyfriend, the younger sister and her shopping, and my half-sister, who can now speak a little. I remained mute until he asked me about school. When I responded, he became upset and launched into a conspiracy theory rant. I ignored him for the rest of the drive. The rest of the weekend wasn't any better. The older sister did what she always does when I visit. She locked herself in her room and only came out when I left the home or went to the bathroom to avoid having to talk to me. The younger sister had a friend over, and her friend threw her belongings on my bed and sat on it because that is where she sleeps when she has sleepovers. Eric's wife did a bad job of concealing her displeasure with my presence. She was often taken aback by my presence because Eric had not informed her in advance, so she couldn't argue. Eric spent most of the weekend taking me and my half-sister to a playground where she could run around with her friends. I sat on a seat to read, but I didn't have much time for myself because Eric kept leaving and telling me to keep an eye on my half-sister, who is a wild and fussy child. I am not a babysitter, and while I am wonderful with children, that doesn't mean I relish devoting my own time to caring for them when they are not my duty. I had to spend 2 days in either utter commotion or discomfort, and I told my mother that I didn't want to go over there anymore. She said everything was all right and that she would not force me to leave, but I don't believe her because she has said it before. I don't have someone to talk to about it and the whole scenario is freaking me out. I don't recall my father ever being as happy as he is today, yet I still feel like I should be glad for him. I don't know what to do, so any guidance would be appreciated. Everyone who posted on my last article claimed I'm not a jerk and Eric isn't acting like a father should, but he still reaches out from time to time and calls me his baby girl, whom he adores. I almost cry when he says that because it reminds me of how we used to be. Am I overthinking this or overreacting? What shall I do? Am I a jerk for not being pleased for my father? You should inform your mother that the more she compels you to go to your father's, the worse your relationship with her will get, because she is not listening to what you want or how you feel. You should also tell her that you no longer trust what she says, because she has previously stated that she will not force you to leave, but she does anyway. If you can't talk to your mother, talk to your stepfather about it and see if he can help. Update 2. Hello everyone. It's only been a few days since I last posted. Since then, I've followed most of your advice and spoken with my mother about not wanting to be compelled to visit Eric, my sperm donor, as most of you referred to him. Long story short, I'm not certain she won't keep sending me over to Eric's place, but she did end up sending him long texts chastising him for not treating me properly and ordering him to step up and pay child support. He didn't respond to her, so I took some other advice and sent him a lengthy text outlining how I felt about his treatment of me over the prior few years. As soon as I sent the text, he called to shout at me. He called me spoiled and overdramatic, stating it's my fault we don't have a relationship because I don't visit or communicate with him anymore. And because I cited the unpaid child support, he accused me of merely asking for money. I almost sobbed throughout that phone call and ended up hanging up on him. He also wrote some angry texts to my mother, but later that day, he left a voicemail on my phone saying, "Money is so tight for me right now. I'm completely broke. You are aware of my feelings for you, correct?" The trouble is, I know it's a lie since I always see my younger stepsister posting TikTok videos showing off the Sephora and other expensive items dad gets her. I believe I'm done trying. Some of you suggested I seek my stepfather for help. I wish I could, but when I asked my mother again if he could adopt me, She replied something that broke me completely. Apparently, my stepfather has stated that he does not feel he should adopt me. My stepfather is really nice and compassionate, but he is also incredibly non-confrontational, and he believes that adopting me would be a slap in the face to Eric. Also, to clear up any confusion from the comments on my last update, my parents' divorce was not due to his current wife. My parents separated when I was a baby, and Eric resided in Canada, where he moved from woman to girlfriend before moving here. When I was 12, Dad met and knocked up his wife, Alejandra, and married her without informing me until a month after their courthouse wedding. In case you're wondering, my age is 15. It feels silly that I am experiencing this level of stress at my age, and I don't feel comfortable discussing it with anyone. I can't talk to my stepfather since he's usually working, and when he comes home, my mother is also around, which I dislike talking to. She often tells me I'm too young to feel the way I do. The last time I attempted to address my mental health with Mom, I asked if I could begin therapy, and she said therapists are stupid, and I should simply talk to her or pray to God if something was wrong. I'm not religious, and discussing serious issues with her makes me very uncomfortable. It's not that I don't love her. After all, she's my mother, but she's quite intense and scary. My father has not contacted me again after his voicemail. Frankly, I don't want to think about him for a long time. If he suddenly understands how severely he has messed up with me and apologizes, maybe I will try to repair our connection. My stepfather may not wish to adopt me, but he still refers to me as his daughter rather than simply his stepdaughter, and I actually feel loved by him. I adore his parents like they are my own grandparents, and his entire family is kind and loving. I might post another update if anything else happens, but for now, I'm going to concentrate on school and my books. Maybe now that I understand Eric no longer cares about me, I can finally focus on writing my third novel. I dedicated my first book to him, and I do not regret it. I dedicated that work to the father he once was. It's unlikely he'll ever read it because he doesn't think it's sensible for me to want to be a writer, but I don't care, I'm done. Thank you to everyone who offered advice and assured me that I wasn't a jerk. Update 3. There were so many individuals asking identical questions that it was overwhelming, so I didn't react to any of them immediately. But first, I'll answer those queries before moving on to the real cause for this update. A number of you suggested that I talk to a school counselor or whatever. The trouble is, I do virtual homeschool, and my mother works from home a lot, so I'm honestly too terrified to try it. Plus, even if I talk to my counselor without my mother present, I don't trust adults to keep such things private. I know that seems silly and worrisome, but it's just how my mind works. A number of you also suggested that I bring up the therapy issue with my mother again, but I know it won't work. My mother does not believe in treatment and feels that praying to God or having her preach the Bible to me will resolve everything. As for my stepfather, I adore him and see him as my genuine father, even if he refuses to adopt me. But he is also no help with the treatment issue because he constantly agrees with anything my mother says to avoid arguments. But I'm doing well right now, and I believe things will improve soon. I believe this because I am confident that my mother will eventually petition for sole custody and court-ordered child support. When my parents split, they arranged for custody and child support amongst themselves. The agreement was that I would spend weekends with my father, and he would pay my mother $100 per week. I believe my father just kept that commitment to keep himself looking nice until he could complete his legalization procedure in the United States, as he was a Canadian immigrant. When he was legalized, he stopped paying child support and began indulging his new family. Anyway, I visited my father's place last weekend. This time, my mother did not compel me, and I chose to go because I wanted to give my father one final chance. He took me up from my mother's place and we weren't even down the block when we started fighting. I was excitedly telling him about my business idea of making book boxes and selling books with DIY necklaces and hand-painted bookmarks that matched the book covers. He called my concept dumb, unprofitable, and a waste of money and time. It was an hour's trip to his place, and he became political or upset at everything I said. When I told him I was thinking about applying to institutions like Harvard or the University of Chicago in the future, he became enraged about all the dangerous Cuban and Mexican immigrants in Chicago. He also claimed that Harvard is a waste of time and only famous because rich people go there. I ended up roaring back at him, telling him that he couldn't be so arrogant about non-white immigrants when he was once an immigrant himself. Also, I've never understood why my father is so bigoted toward Hispanics, despite the fact that both my mother and his current wife are Latina. He went on one rant after another, and I was so tired of it that, instead of remaining silent like I usually do, I objected. Because of this, my father spent the entire weekend talking about my bad attitude. I told my mom about everything. I believe the final nail in the coffin that prompted my mother to seek sole custody was when I informed her about my father's rant about the differences between men and women. I ended up memorizing and writing down everything he said, then texting it to my mother. I implored her not to talk to him about it, but she was furious with him. Here's some of what he said. 99% of women want to latch on to rich men. Nearly all women are greedy and unloyal. Men don't like successful and independent women because they're prideful and bossy. It's more important for a wife to respect her husband than for him to respect her. Or it's wrong for wives to make more than their husbands. And so much more. He smiled and added, "But you're the exception, pretty girl." There was so much more that happened just last weekend, such as him saying that some of my guy friends aren't real men because they're gay, and attempting to convince me that my summer volunteering opportunity in the Dominican Republic is a bad idea because the people there are different, despite the fact that my mother's family is from there. I won't go into every annoying thing he did, but I'm finally done. This was his final chance, and he wasted it. I simply wanted to mention that I'm quite sure my mother isn't sending me over there anymore. She spent the entire morning looking for my birth certificate, wondering if she needed it for court. She wants full custody, and if my father paid child support, it would greatly assist me prepare for college. He currently owes a significant amount of child support. Also, I didn't include the names of my books in the postings because I didn't want a bunch of internet strangers to see my social media tags on the back of the book, but I will share the titles with anyone who directly messages me. If anything else happens, I'll most likely post another update. Hopefully, my next report will come after we've been to court. You are not the jerk. Divorce and parenting are difficult. Your biological father sounds like a jerk. He is entirely failing you. I understand why your mother and stepfather want you to establish a relationship with your biological father. It is one of the things parents are urged to do throughout divorce because it is usually better for the children. If your parents obtained a court order granting your biological father weekend visitation, your mother could face legal consequences if you did not visit him. Your stepfather cannot adopt you unless your biological father's parental rights are dissolved by a court, and if your biological father challenges it, things will get messy. Your stepfather's reluctance to undertake such a legal struggle while you are still considered a minor makes sense. I'd wager that it has nothing to do with his affections for you. He expresses his affection for you and your position in his heart every day. He is already your father, so you don't need him to adopt you. Please do not let his fears about the legal situation make you believe he loves you any less. I'm delighted your mother is going for both full custody and child support. Your biological father has to be held accountable. I'm so sad that you lost your biological father. He may be alive, but he is no longer the parent he once was. However, keep in mind that you played no part in this. He's just focusing all of his energy on the woman who, let's say, meets his physical wants, and leaving it at that. It's a regrettably prevalent issue. Forgotten and excluded from my parents' wedding. After 25 years together, I exposed their neglect on social media and revealed the truth. I, 17F, was just forgotten on my parents' wedding day. My parents have been together for approximately 25 years but never married. That's why when my father, 50M, proposed to my mother, 49F, on their anniversary, which they had always celebrated on the day my mother discovered she was pregnant with my eldest sister, despite the fact that they had previously been together, everyone, including me, was overjoyed and celebrated the occasion. This happened way back in February. They moved right into wedding preparations, deciding early on that they would hold a modest affair in Hawaii, with only their closest family and friends for an intimate ceremony. Almost immediately, my mother asked my sister, 25F, to be her maid of honor, and my father asked my brother, 22M, to be his groomsman. I was not surprised nor angered by this. My sister had always been a mommy's girl, and they both enjoyed spending time together shopping and socializing, so they had a strong bond. The same goes for my father and brother. They were often playing football together and messing about with cars. My father even coached my brother's team in middle school. That usually left me as the odd one out. I attempted to participate in my family's interests and groups, but was consistently turned down. Maybe they sensed that my interest in their activities wasn't genuine, or maybe they just didn't mind. Regardless, I was used to being the last and least important member of my family. Mom had a sister, and Dad had a brother. My parents had each other, and my two siblings were closer than they had ever been to me, leaving me feeling lonely and alienated in my own house. During the wedding preparations, it was suggested that I be the flower girl, but my sister thought that role would be more suited to her daughter, 3F, so that proposal was swiftly dropped. Later, my maternal grandmother offered that I read a poem or give a little statement during the ceremony, But both of my parents declined because they wanted the wedding to be low-key and didn't believe a cheesy and sappy speech would match their vision. Those were their exact words. I was still fine with it all, even though it hurt to know that I would be the only family member not in the wedding party or given any role at all on the big day. As the wedding date approached, my parents and siblings were increasingly involved in the arrangements. I observed my mother did not invite me to dress shopping, and whenever they discussed the site or the occasion, I was excluded. So I decided to keep quiet and see if they would understand I wasn't involved in any way, waiting for them to ask me something about the wedding. But that never occurred. The wedding was scheduled 3 weeks ago, toward the end of August. My mother casually asked me the day before their departure whether I had my luggage ready because we couldn't be late at the airport. I honestly informed her that I had not prepared anything. She looked perplexed for a second before snapping at me for not being prepared. I immediately asked her if I had a ticket, and her face turned pale. Yes, they hadn't even purchased my ticket, and I'm not sure if I had a room or any other amenities once there. Even though I was the only member in my family without a steady income, I work as a part-time babysitter. My parents had purchased first-class tickets for my siblings and a couple of other friends who were attending the wedding, but they had overlooked me. My mother urged me not to make a big deal about it and that they could simply find me a low-cost, last-minute ticket from a budget airline. I just said, then what do I even have to wear to the ceremony? She went shopping with sis months ago for her and all of the other female guests' outfits, but I was not included. That's when my father walked in and ordered me to suck it up, claiming I'd never been a girly girl, so I could wear whatever. I was upset because, even though I'm not the most feminine girl on the earth, I would have liked to be a part of my parents' wedding. It wasn't just the outfit, it was the fact that I had been excluded from almost everything for months. We all got into a fight, with them calling me entitled and accusing me of making myself little on purpose so they would forget about me, as if that was a sufficient reason to ignore their child. They ended up warning me that if I kept this attitude, I might as well skip the entire event. I replied with a defiant fine, and went into my room. The next morning, they all departed for Hawaii without me. The ceremony was tiny, but they all shared numerous photos on Instagram and Facebook about how amazing and magical the entire week was. People noticed that I wasn't in any of the images and began asking my parents why. They responded that, unfortunately, I got COVID before the trip and had to stay home. I made a throwaway because I didn't want to give out my personal information, which is freely accessible on my real account. Unfortunately, this is not a fake. You are the first to bring up the affair theory in my mind, and I'm not sure what to make of it. I hope this is not true. Commenter: the wedding party and other guests received first-class tickets, but their youngest child did not. How is this possible? Then they don't rectify it by buying you a first-class ticket but rather an economy ticket because it's cheaper. Did you even have accommodations? No dress either, just wear whatever? Now it is your fault that they are careless. Hell no, these parents stink. I believe when she started a cheaper airline, she meant it was more likely that I would arrive on time, as their aircraft was allegedly fully booked. Again, I'm not sure about the accommodations, they made no mention of them. I just know that they all stayed at the same hotel where the ceremony took place. Commenter: instead of fighting for minimum attention from her parents and siblings, she should focus her energies on seeking other sources of fulfillment. I really don't have the strength to do anything these days. I'm starting college later this year and the plan was to live at home because it's not far away, but now I just want to leave. I'm not sure how though. I don't have enough savings or a job right now, and the thought of going out and getting one feels overwhelming. I don't want to drop out, but I want to go somewhere else. I wrote this yesterday because I needed to rant, but I didn't want to start an additional controversy, so it's anonymous. Commenter: if she is in college, she should proceed with the emancipation process. Emancipation will save her a fortune on her schooling, and I guarantee you that her horrible parents did not plan to benefit her in any way. Before all of this, I planned to attend college in my hometown. It's a terrific college downtown, and I was overjoyed to be accepted. A couple of my high school buddies are also going there and will live at home. I was saving to buy a car for simpler transportation, and they were going to pay for my tuition and other expenses, but now I simply want to leave this house. Commenter: stay strong. Do not let them get under your skin. Even if you have to find roommates or move in with a friend, depart as soon as you feel secure with your money. There are Facebook groups and other resources for finding roommates, particularly in college locations. I know that's what I should do. I have a buddy who is moving into a studio apartment near our campus, but I don't have a job right now and don't want to be a burden to her. She and I are close, so I am sure she would invite me to move in with her, but I don't want to be a burden. Also, I don't have a job right now, so I can't pay rent, which is something else I need to work out. Update 1, thank you very much. A few days earlier, I couldn't get out of bed, and my family's comments had convinced me that I was to blame for all that had happened. But after seeing the answers to my article and all of your support, I felt reassured with my acts and thoughts for my family. I'm still dealing with feelings of guilt and melancholy, but anytime I start to spiral, I remember how much this community of strangers has supported me, and I try to calm myself down with your comments. Thanks to your opinion and suggestions, I finally decided to call my grandmother and tell her the whole thing. Before I continue, I should clarify that my grandmother, 77F, did not attend the wedding. I stated it in the comments, but I feel compelled to include it here as well. She lives a few states away and has mobility concerns, so she no longer travels. We went to see her around Easter, and she suggested that I read a poem during the wedding, but that was the last time I saw her in person before all of this. She has always been very affectionate to me and has previously chastised my parents for their favoritism, but she is unable to play a more active role in my upbringing because she lives so far away. I'm constantly apprehensive about troubling her because of her age and health. She had a mild stroke a few years ago and is now back to normal, but I'm still concerned. Anyway, I contacted her and explained everything about the wedding, even how my parents didn't even purchase me a ticket to accompany them. She came to the same conclusion as the majority of the commenters. It was simply unthinkable that they had forgotten and done it on purpose. I cried on the phone with her, explaining how I was feeling, how this had been going on forever, how I felt in the aftermath, and most importantly, my need to go. She was really lovely and soothing to me, telling me that I didn't have anything else to worry about because she had my back completely. She told me to take it easy but make plans for the future, and she promised to help me. After that chat, which lasted around 2 hours, I felt better and decided to take her advice. I began working on a plan for the upcoming academic year. I have a friend who is going to rent a studio near our future campus. She has a wonderful relationship with her parents, but she has 5 younger siblings and wants to be more independent, so she opted to move out. I asked if I might live with her temporarily and pay rent as soon as I acquired a job. She immediately agreed and advised me not to worry about rent or anything else until I was in a better situation. We had a good cry together when I told her about my parents' wedding incident. This happened a few days ago and I had planned to post an update at the time. However, my grandmother called my dad and siblings to chastise them on how they were treating me. My brother texted me later with a half-hearted apology, stating he didn't realize I wasn't included and simply assumed I wouldn't enjoy the vacation. He also accused me of uploading the photo solely to cause trouble. My sister, on the other hand, berated me, telling me that I kept making my problems public and blaming them on the family although they were all innocent. My folks have been acting strangely since returning from their trip. They berated me and were outraged at first, but since then, we've just ignored each other. After my grandmother called them, they came into my room and told me that if I wanted to put this whole thing to rest, I needed to stop talking about it. They say it would have all been over if I'd only kept my mouth shut. I requested them to leave my room and contacted my grandmother again to explain what had transpired. She then told me that she and my uncle, my mother's older brother, had bought plane tickets to see me. I was honestly concerned about this because my grandmother's health isn't great, and this level of work is too much for her. I understand how difficult it is for her to get on a plane, so I attempted to discourage her from coming and assured her that everything would be fine. But she refused to listen, telling me that she was overdue for a chat with my parents and wanted to see me. I'm worried about her and feel like I pushed her to take this lengthy, difficult trip because of me. I want nothing more than to hug her right now, yet I'm concerned about her. At the very least, my uncle will accompany her, but I hope she does not overwork herself or that nothing bad happens to her, because that would shatter me. They arrive tomorrow and haven't notified my parents about their vacation. My grandmother begged me to keep it a secret until she arrived. I'm hoping she'll be able to persuade my parents of the error in their ways, or at the very least, assist me in breaking the news to them that I'll be moving out shortly and intend to maintain no contact. I'm concerned about her having to do so much for me and troubling her, but I also admire and love her for everything she does. Update 2. Many people have messaged me and commented on the post, and I haven't had time to answer to anyone until today, so I apologize. You've all been so kind and caring, and it's been genuinely eye-opening and horrifying to realize how many people have experienced similar stories of neglect and abuse. I just wanted to thank everyone for taking the time out of their day to send some kind thoughts to this online stranger. This update will be lengthy, so I apologize in advance. I'll just resume where I left off. My grandmother called to say she was coming here to see me and help me out. I was quite concerned since my grandmother has a difficult time traveling, So taking this trip would put her under a lot of stress, and I felt responsible for her because I was the one who contacted her. She came early Monday morning with my uncle, and I went to pick her up at the airport. Not going to lie, it was an extremely powerful and emotional experience. As soon as I saw her, I went to her arms and burst into tears. I'm not sure if I could tell her anything because I was crying so hard. I had so many things to say. Thank you for coming. For being so kind to me, and for having my back. I regret forcing you to take this vacation. I feel terrible at home. I'm not sure if my parents love me, but I know you do. Am I an affair child? When I saw her, I was struck by all of this, as well as remorse and fear. But she hugged me tightly in her arms and assured me that everything would be fine. My uncle hugged us as well. I'm not sure how long we stayed like this, but it must have been a while before my uncle urged us to get going. We got a taxi and proceeded to their hotel. My grandmother had watery eyes, and I could feel her heavy breathing, which terrified me, yet she hugged me and smiled the entire time. She had rented a double room for me to stay with her for those days, and once they were settled in and I was calmer, we sat down, and I poured my heart out to them. Years of neglect, emotional abuse, how horrible I felt after the wedding, but also how I had felt for years. I stated how my parents were attempting to make me feel guilty for everything that had happened, and how terrified I was about my future, but that my number one priority was to get out of the house, even if it meant sacrificing my academics. I informed them that I had made plans to move in with a buddy and was seeking work. I also told them about this post and how several people assumed I was an affair child, and I admitted that I was starting to doubt that myself. It was a lot, and I could tell they were both deeply touched by what I was saying, but they continued to soothe me and make me feel safe enough to open up. After I expressed my anxieties, my grandmother reassured me that I had nothing to worry about and that she would always be there for me. First, she assured me that I was not an affair child. She informed me that both of my parents were overjoyed when my mother became pregnant with me, and she knew that adultery would be a deal breaker for my mother, as she imagined it would be for my father. Apparently, the favoritism started when I was 3 or 4 years old, when my parents were continually complaining about having a young child in the family. They were frustrated because they could transport my older siblings to their activities but not me. I was also quite shy and a bit of a crybaby, which they could not tolerate, setting me apart from my siblings. She told me that my parents had saved more than enough for my college. They're pretty wealthy, so that had never been an issue for me, despite my recent concern that they could take the funds away from me. She told me that if they ever tried to refuse to pay for my education, she would handle it, and she would not allow me to drop out due to financial constraints. She also offered to help me with rent and an allowance so that I could move out. She was quite giving, and I thanked her, but I also mentioned that this experience had been eye-opening. I had no idea how wealthy I had been monetarily my entire life. Despite their flaws, my parents have spoiled me financially. I attended private school, received a huge monthly allowance, and owned a car for years, and they never complained about my expenses. Seeing the experiences presented here made me understand how fortunate I was and how relying on them put me vulnerable to losing everything. I told her that I wanted to be independent, not just from my parents, but from everyone. I feel as if I need to learn to stand on my own. To be honest, writing this and reading the experiences of individuals in truly bad situations makes me feel like a spoiled brat my entire life. My grandmother demanded I take her assistance until I no longer needed it, and I accepted, but I still want to look for work and try to make it on my own. We relaxed at the hotel for a bit because we were all tired from the morning, but in the afternoon, we took a cab to my place. When I stepped through the door, my parents were completely surprised to see my grandmother and uncle with me. Before they could say anything, my grandmother urged me to go pack my basics while they spoke with my parents. I rushed upstairs and overheard my grandmother and uncle berating my parents for everything they had put me through. At first I could hear my parents defending themselves, but they finally quieted down. When I arrived downstairs with 2 suitcases and a backpack containing my most crucial belongings, they were all in the living room. My father turned crimson red and my mother sobbed like a kid. When she spotted me, she stretched her arms toward me, apologizing, but I simply responded, "Save it," in the coldest tone I could conjure. My father told me I didn't have to be a jerk, and both my uncle and grandmother ordered him to stop up. I exited the premises at that point and waited for the cab outside. Back at the motel, my grandmother told me that I would not have to return to them. She informed me that my parents had never questioned my college tuition and had intended to throw me an elaborate birthday party to compensate for the wedding fiasco. They even planned to give me a car as an apology for everything. But my grandmother was having none of it because it was evident to her that they were just attempting to save face. She believed they were making these decisions on the fly, and that a party and a car wouldn't compensate for everything they had put me through. My mother's heart apparently broke when my grandmother informed her that I had even questioned my paternity. My mother burst into tears, but my grandmother informed her that given their actions, what more could they expect after constantly excluding me from family functions since I was a child? My grandmother said she would make sure they made the payments for my school unless I decided to cut relations with them and have her pay till I could pay for myself. I asked her to do that. I felt horrible since I didn't believe it was her obligation, but I really don't want anything else from my parents anymore. Although my grandmother is very well off, she is not as affluent as my parents, but she informed me that everything was okay and that whatever went to me would be deducted from my mother's inheritance. The next day, I went with my buddy, her parents, and my grandmother to inspect the studio where we planned to relocate. When my grandmother arrived, she said, "Absolutely not." I knew from the photographs that the studio was small and dusty, but when we discovered water damage and mildew in the bathroom and kitchen, as well as rust on the old equipment, it was evident that it wasn't livable. I was aware of all of this previously and thought I could deal with it for a time, but what really changed our minds was when the grown-ups pointed out that the studio was street level in a terrible neighborhood, in a building that didn't appear particularly safe. There were bullet holes on the walls, which I had not noticed until my friend's father pointed them out. Grandma and my friend's parents offered to help us find an apartment in a better area and cover the fees. Both my friend and I want to be self-sufficient, but we realize that with potential minimum wage employment in such a high-demand region, we would be unable to get anything better on our own. So the plan is to hunt for a 2-bedroom apartment, and my buddy and I will pay what we intended for the studio, with her parents and my grandmother covering the rest. I know I'm still spoiled to anticipate aid from my grandmother, but after seeing the studio in person, I honestly wouldn't have felt secure there. My friend's parents, who were aware of what I was going through, invited me to live with them until we found a suitable apartment, for which I'm really thankful. I've been staying in the motel with Granny since she leaves in a few days. Apparently, my friend, her parents, and my grandmother discussed this before coming to me to ensure I had a safe place to stay until we moved into the apartment, which has yet to be discovered. I teared up as I thanked them, seeing how many people had rallied around me to give assistance. Since then, I've started moving some of my belongings from my parents' house and setting up my space at a friend's. Every time I return, my mother cries and apologizes, and my father has also apologized, but I stay distant and cold toward them. My sister called to say her mother was a wreck and that I was a D-bag for what I had done. Before she could say anything else, I hung up and blocked her. I was about to block my brother as well, but I noticed he had sent me a very long message in which he apologized repeatedly for all he had done and for not comprehending how horribly our parents treated me. He stated he had been doing a lot of self-reflection since Grandma called and realized he was mistaken in presuming I wasn't on the trip because I didn't want to go. He also regretted allowing our parents to exclude me for so many years. I replied briefly, thanking him for his thoughts but stating that I need space and am not ready to accept his apology just yet. I believe he is sincere because he has never been mean to me in the same manner that my sister has, only distant. However, I feel compelled to keep him at a distance for the time being. Keeping in touch with my family feels like the correct thing to do while everything is still so new. Maybe in the future he will show me that he is just as vicious as everyone else, and I will block him. However, as long as he respects my boundaries, I feel better not cutting him off totally. I've also scheduled an appointment with a therapist who specializes in neglected teenagers, and my first preliminary consultation is next week, which will be sponsored by my grandmother. This makes me even more eager to get a job to relieve her of the load, despite the fact that she has repeatedly stated that she is willing to do everything for me. That's where things are right now. I'm not sure if I'll blog again. Maybe after I start classes or move into my apartment, but for now, I'm just trying to spend time with my grandmother and uncle. I'm working on learning to grow and overcoming the feelings of guilt and depression that have haunted me for so long. I'd like to thank this community again for being so nice and helpful to me. To everyone who has messaged me with their own personal stories of being kicked out or having to make it on your own at such a young age, you've made me feel a lot less alone. You've also shown me that things can improve if I work hard for them. I feel lucky because I have such an incredible support system in my grandmother, uncle and buddy, but you're right, reaching out has been the finest move I could have made. Opening out about my sentiments to those that love me, as well as all of my internet pals, has genuinely saved my life. So thank you. I am more appreciative than words can describe. Commenter, I'm curious. When you returned to collect your belongings, what exactly did your folks say? Oopie. Every time I've gone there, my mother has been crying and saying I'm sorry, again and again, but I haven't talked to her, so she hasn't expressed anything in particular. I also haven't given her a chance. My father has largely remained silent, staring at me whenever I enter and depart. When he apologized, he said something along the lines of, "I'm sorry for everything," without acknowledging any fault on his part. I'm not sure if they're shocked by all that's going on. I'm overwhelmed and haven't had time to digest it all, or if they don't believe they've done anything wrong and are simply acting for grandma. I honestly do not know. Commenter, don't chop off your nose to spite your face when it comes to college money. Your parents are responsible for paying the entire bill. Don't burden yourself with that expense when they can cover it. It's the absolute minimum they can do. OOP, my grandmother has already told me that it is unacceptable for me not to attend college simply because my parents will not pay, and she will not allow me to take out student loans either. I asked if she would co-sign, and she flatly refused, saying she'd rather pay herself than see me upset about money. I will not sacrifice my education because of my parents, but I will take advantage of this opportunity with my grandmother. I'd rather not receive money from my parents because I know they'll hold it over me for the rest of my life, as if I owed them. I'm really fortunate that my grandmother will take care of this, even though I feel I don't deserve her. Commenter, I hope you don't feel bad for coming from a wealthy family. You are not privileged. You appear to be more self-aware than many others from your upbringing. Working and living separately from your family will allow you to explore the world. I honestly don't believe you're a pampered, affluent child. Working for what we need develops character and teaches us a variety of skills, including how to deal with tough people, the value of each hour and dollar earned, collaboration, societal institutions, and more. I'm pleased you have a safety net with your grandmother, and don't listen to anyone who would judge you for it. Many of us live paycheck to paycheck, and I would not want that on anyone just starting out in life. If you ever want to give us an update on how things are doing, I will absolutely read it. Thank you for sharing this terrible period in your life. OOP, I feel more than guilty, angry at my heritage and how ignorant I've been my entire life about my privileges. This self-awareness you stated has only recently come to light for me. When I initially clashed with my parents, I didn't think about money or how I'd support myself. That's always been a given for me, which is wonderful considering I'm still under 18. But after posting here and reading posts from others who have had to deal with the financial ramifications of being neglected, cutting off their family, or leaving home at an early age, I realized how out of touch I had been. Crazy mother-in-law and father-in-law arrested after attempting to trespass on our land and being attacked by bees on the neighbor's property. I reside in a very rural place on a tiny ranch that has been in my family since my grandfather's day. We are around 15 minutes from the nearest little town. When I say small, I actually mean small. My wife and I met by happenstance around 6 years ago when I stopped in town to pick up some groceries. She gave off a tomboy feeling and had recently arrived in the region. She had recently finished school and discovered that she despised city life and wished to return to something more familiar. I will get to that later. I believe she noticed me come in with my pickup and some big equipment and came over to ask what kind of animals I had. She soon came to the point. She was looking for work. She had previous experience with cattle and was new to the region. It's unusual in our area to see single women looking for ranch hand employment, but she claimed she could prove herself, and if I wasn't impressed, I could drive her back to town and drop her off at the bus stop. I was seeking an extra hand for the next few months and had considered asking my neighbor's lads, but I decided to give her a chance. I'm pleased I did since she had a strong work ethic and was proactive about everything on the ranch. I let her remain in a guest room in the main home for the first week until she saved enough money for an apartment. Within 6 months she moved back in and we began dating. 8 months later, we married in a quiet ceremony attended by approximately 20 friends and family members. Her uncle was the only family member that turned up. Her uncle was a tank of a man, even in his old age, and he had a sheep farm in Northern California. During the ceremony, we talked a little about business, and he was pleased to give my wife away. I could tell how the father influenced her work ethic and livestock knowledge. However, there was one topic that my wife disliked discussing: her biological parents. At first, she only mentioned there was bad blood between them, which was great because we didn't know each other well yet. However, once we were engaged, I wanted to learn more about her family and what I was getting into. Her mother, the professor, worked at a college teaching a subject I would most likely never study. My wife portrayed her father, Phil, as a weak man who would do whatever the professor desired. Some of the details she told me about her mother's actions seemed ludicrous and borderline psychotic. For example, in middle school, the professor tried to obtain my wife a girlfriend by claiming she was a lesbian. Now, while my wife is a tomboy, she is not a lesbian. There was also a time when the professor desired to live a natural lifestyle, and begged Phil's brother to allow them to reside on his property. Within a week, the professor despised it and summoned them both back to the city. My wife, on the other hand, adored the farm and felt a connection to both it and her uncle. She left home at 16 and stayed with her uncle until she was 18. The professor repeatedly threatened to drag her back home, but never followed through. After turning 18, my wife went to school, received a 4-year degree, and tried an office job but found it unsatisfactory. She began traveling the bus to rural locations in search of suitable work, and this is how we met. Last year, around March, we began receiving mail addressed to the professor and Phil, including bills, bank statements, and the like. I thought this was unusual, but my wife wanted to throw it all away. I began labeling the letters returned to sender and no such occupant, and returned them to the mailbox. This situation worsened in October. I was tidying up the yard when a brilliant white SUV arrived with a U-Haul trailer attached. My wife looked up and turned pale. "Oh God, it's them," she exclaimed. A plump woman and a slender man, who only distantly resembled her uncle, emerged. The professor instantly approached my wife. "Professor. Well, let me take a look at you. It has been years." The wife. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "Your instructor. The university is doing virtual classes, and with COVID, we figured we could self-isolate at our ranch." She placed an unusual emphasis on the word our. "You. Excuse me, but this isn't your ranch." "Professor. I'm confident we can resolve the ownership issue. Aren't you going to invite us in?" "Me? Ma'am, you might be my wife's mother, but you're a stranger to me. I would rather not." The professor turned to Phil. "Professor. Make the call." Phil immediately called the cops and began constructing a story about us refusing to let them into the house that they co-owned. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was insanely twisted. Fortunately, as I indicated earlier, it is a small town. The sheriff approached, and it was someone I had known for most of my life. The sheriff exemplifies the ethos of a small town constable. He strives to be a peacemaker and peacekeeper first and foremost. He was also aware that the land had been in my family for 3 generations. "Sheriff, please explain. What's this I hear about you selling half your ranch, Duke?" "Me? I did not. These are my wife's parents, and they believe they have a legal claim to my land." "Professor. Not think? We have lived here since February. With tenant laws that means." "Sheriff, you know. Funny, I don't remember you in town." That quieted the professor for a moment, but then she delved into her purse and drew out a stack of mail, mostly bills and bank statements with our ranch's address on them. "Professor. Then how do you explain these?" The sheriff took the letters and examined them. "Sheriff, you're welcome. Ma'am, these are all marked return to sender." The professor became desperate. "Professor. Please, I have not seen my daughter in years. I just want to make sure she is okay. Surely, you can see that he," she pointed at me, "controls her every move." The sheriff rolled his eyes and approached to speak with my wife and me again. He enjoys resolving interpersonal conflicts, but he had never experienced such craziness. "Sheriff. You might want to invite them in for coffee and chat for a few minutes. They're your parents." "My spouse? If you leave them here, you'll just have to come back in 5 minutes to handle an assault." "Sheriff. You can't mean that. They are your family." "Look, I'm just heading up the road. Invite them in and talk to them." Wife's eyes flashed with rage. Your wife asked, "Does this mean you're going to invite your cousin Aaron to Thanksgiving?" Aaron, the sheriff's cousin, was now serving an 8-year sentence for a variety of felonies. The sheriff's entire family regarded him a source of disgrace. The sheriff's expression changed after he made that statement. He gave my wife a look like, "That bad, huh?" And she simply nodded. The sheriff turned back to face the professor and Phil. "Sheriff. Okay, they don't want you here. It's best if you don't come back." The two protested briefly before piling back into the SUV and driving away, with the sheriff following behind to verify they were completely off the property. This was my first meeting with the professor and Phil, and it left a lasting impression. Previously, I described how my wife's mother, the professor, made an unusual attempt to grab control of our property back in October. Things became crazier in December. Keep in mind that we reside in a little village approximately an hour from a major city, so we're not completely isolated. Our ranch is approximately 15 minutes from town via farm road. To give you the lay of the land, I stopped in town to grab some supplies, and by the time I finished packing up the truck, the professor tapped me on the shoulder. This time, she truly acted friendly. I decided to be curt. She literally begged me to listen to her for 5 minutes at the neighborhood cafe. I didn't want to set up a scene on Main Street, so I agreed. We sat down, and the lecturer began speaking. She claimed that my wife was always unsure of who she was, and that the professor and Phil only had her best interests in mind. I didn't want to rant or make charges. I was just waiting for the talk to end. Then she explained, "Your wife saw you coming and wedged herself into my life." I pushed back. I stated that I felt blessed to have her in my life. "Professor, what do you mean blessed?" "Me? Pardon?" "Professor, you just said blessed." I put my head in my hands and wished it was over. Everyone in the cafe stared at the two of us. With her final sentence, the lecturer projected her voice. My response was, "Ma'am, if you're trying to win me over, I suggest you stop using vinegar." She huffed at the phrase but then became friendly again. She reached into her purse and took out a flash drive, laying it on the table between us. "Professor. Okay, that's all the proof you need. Take a peek, and I guarantee you'll discover the truth." I was dying within, not just from shame, but also from the manner my mother-in-law behaved in front of individuals with whom I do business on a regular basis. They would certainly want to know what had transpired. Like I stated, it's a little town. I took the flash drive and fled. I returned to the property, where my wife was waiting. She could tell something had happened in town by the pissed-off expression on my face. I recounted what had happened while holding up the flash drive. My wife was baffled by it. I wasn't about to plug it into a computer we use on a regular basis, so I hunted through a closet for an old Dell laptop that hadn't been turned on in ages. We charged it, turned it on, and blocked the Wi-Fi, my wife's suggestion. We plugged the flash drive in and discovered heaps of PDFs. I'm still not sure how to convey what was within. It looked like a journal, a college article, or a thesis research, with my wife as the topic. I'm not sure what the aim was, or what the professor was testing on her own flesh and blood. It described her first experiences with toy dump trucks as a child, as well as dressed in overalls during their brief stay with her uncle, all of which were chilly, disconnected and, as my wife described it, clinical. My wife was referred to as the subject throughout. It was odd and I'm still unsure what the point was. My wife was outraged by the PDFs and urged us to burn the drive, which we did in the fire pit. That was the last time we heard from the professor, but my wife believes more will come. First and foremost, I want to mention that my wife is doing well. She's amused rather than terrified or furious, yet I can tell when she feels the need to be protected. We placed a new camera directed straight at the gate, which I'm keeping locked. I noted in the comments that we had a FaceTime contact with my wife's uncle last night to see if we could gain any additional information. Her uncle initially provided brief responses, such as, "Yeah, sounds like her," and "sounds about right." He is a don't speak ill of others type of chap. When I told him about the strange play for the ranch, he eventually revealed additional facts. Whoever predicted she'd do this before with his sheep farm gets a gold star. He stated that the professor was a major reason why he and Phil no longer speak. My wife's uncle's sheep farm was part of a much larger property owned by her grandfather. The grandfather had 3 children, 2 sons and 1 daughter. The daughter relocated to the East Coast and worked in a high-paying executive position. She is nearing retirement and was the oldest of the siblings. When the grandfather passed away, he divided his property into 3 portions. His daughter gave her half to the uncle for nearly nothing because she did not desire rural property and understood her uncle wanted to keep the farm running. The other son, Phil, retained ownership but granted uncle permission to use it. That was until Phil decided to attend an expensive university and sold his portion of the land to uncle for a good price. Uncle was able to maintain all of grandfather's land intact. Phil dated the professor during his undergraduate years and eventually married her. Uncle only heard bits and pieces because Phil only called around Thanksgiving and birthdays. That was it for many years. A few years later, the professor was in what uncle described as a hipster phase when he learned about the farm. She didn't just show up, Phil asked first. Phil understood rural life, but the professor did not. Uncle portrayed the professor's ideal farm life as waking up to a kale smoothie, digging beets for lunch, and spending the rest of the day in the sun. If you live on a farm or ranch, you know there are plenty of everyday duties. Uncle's farm was largely a sheep farm, but they also had a vegetable garden and a small orchard, which provided enough of work. Uncle went easy on the professor, assigning her only a few tasks such as pruning dead vines in the garden and airing the compost. She took it as an agony. She nearly devastated Uncle's tomato crop that year, forcing him to redo the compost every evening. But the way she grumbled, you'd think she was looking after the entire orchard and all the sheep. She disliked manual labor but was strangely drawn to the concept of a farm. In my experience, joy cannot exist without pain. My wife, on the other hand, took to it right away. She enjoyed checking fences, maintaining the flock, distributing feed and working in the vegetable garden. Uncle mentioned that they had a local butcher who came by on occasion to take a couple lambs, depending on price and demand. The butcher paid the professor a visit once when he was on the farm. The butcher was a black man, which Uncle didn't bother or care about, but the professor made a big deal of welcoming him by shaking his hand and spoke in a sing-song, high-pitched tone. Uncle thought this was weird, so he mentioned it to us. The professor desired the farm but did not want to work it. She wanted to own it on paper and have Uncle and her husband manage it. She even persuaded her husband to fight the sale he had made with Uncle a few years before, in order to gain partial ownership. Of course, this went nowhere. Uncle had to pay a lawyer, but the case never reached court. After that, Uncle and the rest of the family refused to speak with Phil. I was curious, so I asked Uncle why the professor yelled at me when I stated I was blessed to have my wife. He chuckled and added, "Really kicked that hornet's nest, huh?" Then he mentioned that the first night the professor stayed with Uncle, he and his wife cooked dinner. When they sat at the table, Uncle was about to say grace. My wife flushed when he mentioned this. Apparently, this is a humiliating memory for her. The lecturer exclaimed, "This family doesn't say grace." Uncle shrugged. He wanted to be flexible and told her she didn't have to participate if she didn't want to. She tried to push things even farther, demanding that as long as she was in that house, no one would say grace. Uncle stated that this was the first time he had been disrespectful to the professor, and that no guest would tell him what he could and could not do in his own home. I'm not sure why the lecturer believed that individuals in rural areas did not attend church. After hearing about the sheep farm, I will contact a lawyer. We'll see how it goes. I believe I mentioned it in a previous piece, but we live in a tiny town, and my wacky mother-in-law, the professor, has already caused a stir in only 2 appearances, one at our house and another in town. What I appreciate about small communities is that everyone feels like family and looks out for one another. What I detest about small communities is how quickly gossip spread. The sheriff from my initial post is completely on our side. Dan has done his best to explain to everybody who asks that it is not their business. The difficulty is between my wife and me. We attempted to be social in town before COVID. We attended church regularly and took part in potlucks. I hired my neighbor's boys to help out on the ranch numerous times over the summer. We enjoy being social. When the professor created a disturbance at the cafe in December, I could feel the town's attention on me. Nobody knows what happened, but they want to. I can feel it. They are too polite to ask, yet not enough to avoid whispering. It's getting to us. The sheriff informed me that last week, the local pastor directly asked him what was going on with my wife and her mother. The sheriff stated that the pastor believed there should be an easy answer. Sheriff caught it in the bud. My wife's statements had a greater impact than we anticipated. The sheriff stated that unless we requested assistance, it was neither his nor the pastor's responsibility. He did remark to the pastor, and I recall how the sheriff put it to me, "They're part of your flock. She," referring to the professor, "is the wolf. Become an excellent shepherd." Despite this, I continue to receive strange looks whenever I am in town. Scenes like the one in December are unusual around here. Any advice? So it eventually occurred. The professor and Phil are in jail. The circumstances are also unusual, but we are relieved that a resolution has been reached. 2 nights ago, the sheriff called us in the middle of the day. My wife picked up, and after a few minutes of conversation, she began chuckling. She told me what the sheriff said. It appears the professor and Phil decided to try to sneak onto our property. Why? I can't predict this woman. The professor decided that instead of attempting to enter the ranch via the farm road, which we can see from our house, she and Phil would park a bit further away and enter our land via a neighbor's property. My neighbor to the east owns a small orchard and is a hobby beekeeper. He doesn't receive much honey each year, but what he does get he shares or sells at the farmer's market. The bees had just begun to pollinate the field chickweed here. The professor evidently stumbled upon his bee boxes, actually bumping into one. The bees start swarming her, and either she or Phil become enraged and kick one of the boxes over. My neighbor has a sensor perimeter around his bee boxes in case of bears, and it went off. He dashed to his bee boxes and saw 2 middle-aged people batting at bees and yelling. My neighbor phoned the authorities, and after about 20 minutes of attempting to burn and hose the bees down, he swiftly filed charges for the destruction of his bee box and trespassing. Apparently, there are additional charges for interrupting and ruining a farm's agricultural capabilities since his bees pollinate his orchard. They left. Both were apparently coated in stings and are currently in county jail. The sheriff stated that the professor is attempting to argue that the area where the bee boxes are located is a public easement and that she has legal access to it. For the time being, however, it is over. Everyone here breathes a great sigh of relief. After kicking me out for my golden child half-brother, 6 months later, Dad now wants me to lie to cover up his crime or they'll go to jail. Male, 18, turned 18 approximately 4 months ago, and my father kicked me out 6 months ago after my jerk half-brother Derek, 24M, wanted to go back home. He didn't want to rent a place like a normal person, so he chose to live with my father. Derek is my father's kid from his first relationship, but Derek's mother and father split up soon after he was born, so they didn't have much of a relationship after that. Derek is much closer to my father than he is to his mother, so we spent a lot of time together growing up since he came over more frequently than was legally required under his custody agreement. I believe he was meant to spend half of the month with my father, but he was always present. Or maybe that's just my brain exaggerating things because I despise spending time with him, but my father compelled us to. I also know that he disliked me and considered me a threat. My mother died a few years ago following a lengthy fight with lung cancer, and that's when things started to go wrong between me and my father. Don't get me wrong, things had been awful between us since I was a child. I suppose my father didn't really want a child like me, or perhaps he didn't want a child in general. Whatever it was, he treated me strangely when I was younger, and it nearly always seemed like he didn't want me around. Most of the time, he was angry with me and yelled at me for little matters. He never showed me affection, and when I tried to win him over, he responded with indifference. However, Derek was a very different guy. When Derek was around the house, my father transformed into the best father in the world, doing everything I asked of him. He compelled Derek and me to spend time together despite the fact that we both expressed a strong dislike for each other. Derek did not like me because he regarded me as a threat, and I did not like him since he used to bully me as a child. He was always trying to fight with me and push me around just because he could. He felt he could get away with it since my father would never speak against him. When I complained to my father about Derek being harsh with me, he told me to toughen up and deal with it because, allegedly, that's how boys should play, and he didn't want me to grow up to be a pansy. I assumed it was what my father expected of me, so I gradually learned to swallow my pride and accept it. I would never fight back because I didn't want to upset my father, and I knew fighting with Derek was a definite way to get shouted at. It didn't matter whether Derek was screwing things up for me, whenever I battled with him, I was always in the wrong. My father didn't care about the story. Whatever happened, I was always the bad person. It was clear that my father had a favorite, and it wasn't me, not even for a second. He didn't think it was weird that Derek was picking on me, even though I was 6 years younger than him. Derek gradually modified his techniques of bullying me. When he began high school, he shifted to tormenting me with his pals because physically striking me was no longer effective as we grew older. Before that, school had been my safe haven because I was still in elementary school while he was in middle school, and we were in different buildings, so he couldn't reach me there. But after I started middle school, we were in the same building, and he and his cronies ganged up on me, constantly making fun of me. They even propagated malicious falsehoods about me, such as suggesting I was mentally handicapped. All the seniors recognized me as Derek's dumb younger brother. I'm not even kidding, that's what they used to call me. They would even call me slurs, which made things very tough for me. When kids approach middle school, they become more concerned with their reputation, so even my elementary school pals would no longer speak to me since I wasn't cool enough to hang out with them. It wasn't until Derek graduated that I got the school all to myself and could exist peacefully. I had a couple of friends, but most people just believed them, and I let them get away with it because I was so tired of fighting all the time that I couldn't bear to dispute. Things at home were exactly as horrible as they had always been since Derek and my father would never miss a chance to throw me down and make me feel like an idiot. The funniest thing was that I wasn't even an idiot. I received decent marks and excelled in science and other topics, but my father and Derek didn't care. Derek was a football player, but he was also a good student. You can imagine how difficult things must have been for me at home. Derek was everything I was not. Athletic, academically gifted, and exactly the kind of kid my father had always desired. On the other hand, there was me, who was completely average. They never failed to remind me of how insignificant and mediocre I was. My mother attempted to protect me most of the time, but my father was a real sweet talker, and he would convince her that what they said was just for fun and didn't mean anything. My mother, who was normally nice and sweet, was deeply in love with my father and never saw him for who he truly was. She did her best to protect me and I admired her efforts, but it wasn't enough. My father and Derek continued to bully me as long as they could. Finally, Derek left for college, and I felt relieved. My father was still present, but he was a lot less irritating to deal with without Derek continually picking on me. But before I could experience what it was like to live with my parents without Derek, my mother was stricken with lung cancer. It was extremely tough for us to accept since it felt like our entire world had been broken. My father and I only had one thing in common. We both adored my mother, thus her illness devastated us both. Instead of bringing our family closer, my father chose to make the worst of it. My mother was already hurting, but instead of my father and I putting up a brave front for her, he began to distance himself from her even more. Previously, he would at least speak to me, even if only to mock me, but following my mother's illness, he stopped doing that and began pretending I didn't exist at all. I can forgive him for it because we were both in pain, and he simply chose a different approach. I would have preferred that my mother's dilemma brought us closer together, but that was plainly not to be. Even if it was meant to be, my father was the type of person who would make it impossible because, for some reason, he despised me and couldn't tolerate the thought of me being happy. My mother's illness worsened over time, and my father's temper began to affect me. He would either not speak to me at all and utterly ignore me, or he would be really hostile to me. He almost made me weep several times because he was so disrespectful. I attempted to keep the peace in the family by not responding to my father since I knew it would only give him more reasons to berate and pick on me. When my mother was unwell, Derek would take it easy on me when he returned home from college, which I enjoyed. He wasn't polite to me, but at least he was human, which was all I could ask for. Things were horrible when my mother was still alive, but once she died, I went from frying pan to fire. Things were very quiet around the house for the first few months after my mother passed away. That meant I'd do all of the labor while my father stayed unresponsive. He was functional, he went to work, came home and ate dinner, but nothing else. I was concerned for him and phoned my grandparents several times, telling them that I suspected my father was depressed, but they did not take me seriously. They either didn't care enough about their son to check on him after the funeral, or they detested me as much as my father and refused to do what I asked. After a few months, my father began to return to his old self. Unfortunately, it also included excessive drinking, which made me feel bad about myself again. He would continuously force me to do chores around the house, which was quite exhausting because I was not only going to school but also doing all of the housework that my mother used to do even when she was sick. My father and I were able to complete everything, but after her death, all of the duty fell to me. I couldn't even complain because if I did, my father would tell me that I wasn't bringing in any money, so this was the least I could do to stay there. It was extremely offensive, but I had nowhere else to go, so I just had to put up with it. For a long time, the only thing I looked forward to was going to college since it meant I could finally be free of my father and not have to return home. I no longer considered that place to be my home because it had stopped feeling like home to me when my mother died. I could have moved out and started living with my mother's parents when she died, but they lived a long distance away, and I still had a year of school remaining, so that was not an option. Then a few months ago, when my father learned that his golden kid Derek would be returning home, he kicked me out. I ended up moving in with my grandparents. Derek had moved out for college a few years ago and has not returned to live with us since. After graduation, he found work and opted to stay where he was because his partner wanted to start a life away from home. Derek only came back for the holidays on occasion. He married his fiancée around 2 years ago since she was pregnant. They had just graduated and it felt like the perfect time to get married. Surprisingly, I got invited to the wedding. Derek didn't torture me for one day. My mother was also present, despite her health, and while Derek wasn't close to her, he couldn't deny that everyone liked her. Derek wasn't very close to his own mother because she was a lousy parent. Derek's mother was already in her 4th marriage at the time of his wedding, and it appeared that her major purpose in life was to be wealthy. She worked and made her own money, but it came at the expense of her connection with her kid. I suppose that explains why Derek was so attached to our father. He only had one parent who actually cared about him, and he didn't want to share that parent with me. Anyway, Derek married and had a child shortly afterwards. They had been living peacefully for the previous 2 years, but 6 months ago, for some reason, they decided to return. My father notified me about it 2 weeks before Derek was meant to arrive home. He was arrogant about it and sat me down one day to tell me I needed to find a place to live since Derek was returning. I had to give up my room. We had 3 bedrooms, so I questioned why they couldn't take the guest room. My father informed me that Derek and his wife would be living in the guest room and using my room as a nursery. It was allegedly important that I leave the house because I was about to turn 18 and become an adult. My father's insistence that I leave simply because Derek was relocating back with his family seemed unnecessary and selfish to me. I tried to argue with him, but there was no point, he had already made his decision. He gave me 2 weeks to leave and if I didn't, he said he'd contact the cops. I'm sure there was a legal way to challenge this, but I hadn't considered it at the time. I was terrified since I didn't trust my father and knew he was perfectly capable of kicking me out without warning. I scrambled to find a place and eventually decided to move in with my grandparents. I had resisted doing so because they lived so far away and I still needed to finish school, but I had no other choice. There were only a few weeks left in high school, so I was willing to take the chance. I moved out after a few days because I did not want to be present when Derek returned home with his wife and child. My father didn't seem to care when I moved out, and he didn't even say goodbye to me on the day I packed and left with the movers. My grandparents had come all the way to pick me up in their vehicle, and they were about to get into my father, but I told them it wasn't worth the hassle. It has been 6 months since that day, and I'm still living with my grandparents. I haven't spoken to my father since he kicked me out, and I had no intention of doing so again. I was meant to start college in a few weeks, and everything was already set up. I had absolutely no reason to speak with my father or Derek again. Unfortunately, they were the ones who had to contact me since something had happened, and they needed me to help them out. They paid me a visit a few days ago, which astonished me because I didn't expect them to contact me at all. Still, my grandparents let them in, and I decided to talk to them because they sounded desperate. I discovered that Derek had returned with his family because he had lost his job and was struggling to pay his rent, so he took the difficult decision to return. His wife was fine with it because she preferred to be a stay-at-home mother and did not want to work till their child was older, so this was their best option. When they returned, they anticipated to find work quickly, but that was not the case because none of the nearby businesses were hiring, and persons with Derek's skill set were extremely prevalent. He wasn't a spectacular candidate, either. My father somehow managed to secure him a position at the company where he worked. Neither of them were happy about it because it paid less than Derek's previous salary, but it was all they had, so they had to make the best of it. Derek had been stealing from the company for several months until it was discovered a few weeks ago. My father and Derek were both in trouble because their bosses suspected they were working together and threatened to sue them if they did not return the money immediately. The only reason they hadn't been sued yet was because it was a family business and the CEO was a close friend of my mother's. He hadn't filed a case against them for embezzlement yet because he respected her, but he wasn't going to wait long. My father and Derek asked me to help them. They asked me to say that they required the money for my college fund and had been stealing for the purpose rather than personal gain. My father hoped that this would persuade the CEO to be patient with them and give them more time to return the money. They knew they'd still be fired, but at least they wouldn't go to prison. They were counting on me to assist them and build the ideal picture of the poor, innocent victim. I could not believe they had the arrogance to ask for this after how they had treated me my entire life. I answered no almost instantly, without even thinking about it, because their plan was stupid, and I didn't want to be a part of that. When I informed them I wasn't interested in assisting them, they became irritated and told me I had to since there was a very real possibility they would wind up in jail. They stated I couldn't allow an old grudge to spoil their lives. I told them it wasn't a little grudge and it surely wasn't from years ago. My father had only recently kicked me out, and it hadn't even been a year, so I'd consider it rather recent. But that wasn't the only reason I didn't want to aid them. I thought their scheme was dishonest, and I knew the guy my father worked for. As I already stated, my mother and he were very close friends and he really liked me. He and my mother had grown up together, and I used to address him as uncle whenever he was over. Even at my mother's funeral, we had a pleasant chat and liked one another. I moved out after a few days because I did not want to be present when Derek returned home with his wife and child. My father didn't seem to care when I moved out, and he didn't even say goodbye to me on the day I packed and left with the movers. My grandparents had come all the way to pick me up in their vehicle, and they were about to get into my father, but I told them it wasn't worth the hassle. It has been 6 months since that day, and I'm still living with my grandparents. I haven't spoken to my father since he kicked me out, and I had no intention of doing so again. I was meant to start college in a few weeks, and everything was already set up. I had absolutely no reason to speak with my father or Derek again. Unfortunately, they were the ones who had to contact me since something had happened, and they needed me to help them out. They paid me a visit a few days ago, which astonished me because I didn't expect them to contact me at all. Still, my grandparents let them in, and I decided to talk to them because they sounded desperate. I discovered that Derek had returned with his family because he had lost his job and was struggling to pay his rent, so he made the difficult decision to return. His wife was fine with it because she preferred to be a stay-at-home mother and did not want to work till their child was older, so this was their best option. When they returned, they anticipated finding work quickly, but that was not the case because none of the nearby businesses were hiring. And persons with Derek's skill set were extremely prevalent. He wasn't a spectacular candidate either. My father somehow managed to secure him a position at the company where he worked. Neither of them were happy about it because it paid less than Derek's previous salary, but it was all they had, so they had to make the best of it. Derek had been stealing from the company for several months until it was discovered a few weeks ago. My father and Derek were both in trouble because their bosses suspected they were working together and threatened to sue them if they did not return the money immediately. The only reason they hadn't been sued yet was because it was a family business and the CEO was a close friend of my mother's. He hadn't filed a case against them for embezzlement yet because he respected her, but he wasn't going to wait long. My father and Derek asked me to help them. They asked me to say that they required the money for my college fund and had been stealing for that purpose rather than personal gain. My father hoped that this would persuade the CEO to be patient with them and give them more time to return the money. They knew they'd still be fired, but at least they wouldn't go to prison. They were counting on me to assist them and build the ideal picture of the poor, innocent victim. I could not believe they had the arrogance to ask for this after how they had treated me my entire life. I answered no almost instantly, without even thinking about it, because their plan was stupid, and I didn't want to be a part of that. When I informed them I wasn't interested in assisting them, they became irritated and told me I had to since there was a very real possibility they would wind up in jail. They stated I couldn't allow an old grudge spoil their lives. I told them it wasn't a little grudge, and it surely wasn't from years ago. My father had only recently kicked me out, and it hadn't even been a year, so I'd consider it rather recent. But that wasn't the only reason I didn't want to aid them. I thought their scheme was dishonest, and I knew the guy my father worked for. As I already stated, my mother and he were very close friends and he really liked me. He and my mother had grown up together, and I used to address him as uncle whenever he was over. Even at my mother's funeral, we had a pleasant chat and liked one another. My mother had actually told him to give my father a job at his company when he was struggling, but instead of being grateful, Derek had tried to make a joke of these people, and now my father was attempting to cover it all up by using me as a shield. I thought that was quite low, and I couldn't in good conscience be a part of it. So I informed them that it would be in their best interest to simply pay off whatever amount they had stolen rather than try to cover it up with more lies, since I was not going to side with them. They might land up in jail if they tried to deceive him again. In truth, they should have been pleased that they were given the opportunity to repay the money and avoid a lawsuit, which they would almost certainly lose. That would jeopardize their future since they would undoubtedly go to jail. They had no idea how simple things were for them right now, or how complicated things would become if they carried out their mad plan. I tried to explain it to them, but my father became enraged and refused to listen to my speech. If I wanted to help them, I would support their strategy rather than give them useless advice. So I informed him I was not going to be a part of this, and to my astonishment my father began crying. I'd never seen anything like this before, and it made me very uneasy. He informed me that he had been banking on me because, at the end of the day, I was his son, and that no matter what had happened in the past, he would have supported me if I had been in a similar situation. He stated he expected the same from me because this was such a big matter, and he didn't want to go to prison. Derek felt the same way and urged me to help them since he knew I was popular among my mother's friends and was the only one who could help them. My mother would have made things much easier, but now that she was gone, I was the next best person to deal with it, and they relied on me. It was difficult, but I still had to decline them. I pushed them to come clean and pay back the money they owed. They were enraged and claimed that the only reason I was screwing them over was because they used to tease me when I was younger, and they were dissatisfied with how I handled things today. They departed after that, but I'm still thinking about it and the guilt is eating at me. I keep picturing them in jail, and it just doesn't seem right. At the same time, I do not want to be a part of something unlawful or immoral. It would be an insult to my mother since I would be using her friendship to manipulate a very close friend of hers. I'm terribly torn about what I should do, and time is of the key because my dad and Derek don't have forever to pay off their debt. So am I a jerk for refusing to lie and cover up for my father and half-brother, who have bullied me my whole life? Update 1. I've made a decision, and I believe I'll keep not assisting them out. Not only is it immoral and unethical, but it is also unlawful. And I refuse to be a part of it. If my father and Derek want to stay out of jail, they will have to handle this themselves. It's not like they're in mortal peril. They've been offered the opportunity to make things right, repay the money Derek stole, and get out of this without jeopardizing their image. They can choose to return all of the money and handle this themselves, so I have no cause to feel guilty. The majority of the comments here urge that I keep out of this, not just because my father and Derek were terrible people, but also because what they were doing was horrific, and I wouldn't be able to carry it on my conscience and move on as they would. We're clearly not made of the same stuff, and I wouldn't want to do something like this, which is why I've decided to keep out of it. If they contact me after this, I will block them. For the record, they are already blocked everywhere, but I'm sure they'll try alternative numbers or social media accounts to reach me. My grandparents also believe I'm doing the right thing by remaining out of this because they are responsible for cleaning up the mess they made. It makes no sense to expect anything from me after how they've treated me for so long. Update 2. Hi. So, as expected, my father texted me today. He last visited me 8 days ago and we haven't spoken since. As I already stated, he called me from a different number that I was unfamiliar with and I answered the phone unintentionally. I hung up as soon as I heard my father's voice on the other end, but I was a little slow to block him, so he was able to text me. In the message, he claimed he understood I didn't want to talk about it any further, but he and Derek were in serious difficulty and needed my help. He claimed that their employer was constantly breathing down their necks, threatening to sue if they did not refund the money. It made me feel guilty, but I texted him back and told him that I would not be assisting them and that he should start searching for alternative ways to refund the money rather than avoiding the matter. I then blocked him, hoping he understood where I was coming from. Even if he doesn't, I hope he does the right thing. I don't want to have a father in prison. Update 3. Hey, I haven't heard back from my father yet, but my grandparents contacted my mother's friend, the CEO, to inquire about his plans. We hadn't contacted him previously because he's a busy man, and we didn't want to press him too hard, but we wanted to know what was going on because communicating with my father or Derek was no longer an option. So my grandfather spoke with him and he informed us that he intended to file a lawsuit if he did not receive the money back within a few months. He claimed he was willing to let everything go due to his friendship with my mother, but he couldn't forgive the debt. Honestly, I respected that. He was much more tolerant than most people would have been in this position. He even apologized to me, saying he was sorry for what was occurring, but I told him it was no big deal because I no longer live with my father, and honestly, my father deserves it. We don't know what will happen, but I believe my father is wise enough to realize that he needs to repay the money in some way to avoid going to jail. It will take some time, but I'm confident they will work it out, and I won't have to worry. I also had a long conversation with my mother's buddy, who informed me that before she died, my mother had spoken with him and stated that if I ever wanted to intern anywhere for some fast cash or simply get a job in general, his door was always open. That's good to know, and I'll keep it in mind for the future. Even after she's gone, my mother still looks out for me, which makes me very happy.